What if I told you Einstein didn't die in 1955? He just got bored, built a jetpack from forks and dentures, and launched himself out of a retirement home at 83? Welcome to the wildest story history textbooks never dared to print. This isn't a documentary. It's Einstein versus pudding. Einstein versus bureaucracy. Einstein versus gravity itself. And somehow, squirrels are involved. From pudding explosions to government chases, from a glowing tomato to squirrel calculus, this saga will twist your brain, tickle your ribs, and make you question why your grandpa hasn't tried launching himself yet. This is an 83-year-old Einstein escapes a retirement home with a jetpack. A story so ridiculous, so brilliant, and so dangerously entertaining. You won't believe how far a man can fly when he's powered by prune juice and rage. Subscribe now, because this isn't just storytelling. It's retirement rewritten. There was once a time when the world stood still for Albert Einstein. Heads of state would wait for his nod. Blackboards would sweat under the weight of his chalk. Time bent at his command, and atoms obeyed, until one day, all that power was folded neatly into a beige cardigan and rolled into a retirement home named Sunset Pines. Now, at the age of 83, Einstein sat in a room with floral wallpaper, faded portraits of strangers, and a mysterious odor that hovered somewhere between mothballs and despair. His mind, once the furnace that cracked the universe open, now wrestled with Sudoku puzzles on the back of a cereal box. He'd circled the number 9 6 times. In the same box. Every morning, he shuffled down the hallway in fuzzy blue slippers shaped like hedgehogs. Not because he liked hedgehogs, but because they were the only pair that didn't squeak when he walked. Einstein hated squeaky shoes. They reminded him of the squeaky truth of aging, that even your ankles have opinions now. The retirement home had rules. No physics talk at dinner. No chalkboards after 7 p.m. No unsupervised magnet experiments in the laundry room. And absolutely no attempting to calculate the time dilation of pudding night. Einstein had broken all of them, repeatedly, but he didn't care anymore. He was tired, not sleepy tired, existentially tired, tired in the way only someone who once mapped out space-time can be, and now had to beg the kitchen staff for extra ketchup. One Wednesday morning, Einstein sat on a bench beneath a plastic ficus tree in the common area. He was chewing on toast that tasted like warm cardboard and pretending not to listen to a nearby conversation. The nurses were gossiping. I mean, seriously, one nurse said, twirling her gum, E equals MC something? That's just like one of those Tumblr quotes, right? Einstein froze mid-chew. Yeah, said another, laughing. It's like a meme or whatever. Like live, laugh, love, but for nerds. A corner of Einstein's lip twitched. He set down his toast. He clenched the Sudoku box. A vein in his forehead surfaced. A small but unmistakable signal. Something ancient and mathematical stirred inside him. For years, he had let it go. The lectures misquoted. The textbooks oversimplified. The biopics where he was portrayed by actors who thought relativity was about dating someone younger. But now someone had just compared equals MC squared to live, laugh, love. Something inside Albert Einstein, the same something that once whispered secrets to photons, snapped like a chalkboard under pressure. He stood up, but slowly, because he was 83 and also had a bad hip. Still, he rose with the full weight of science behind him. He turned, faced the nurses, and said in a voice that shook the nearby lava lamp, "It is not a meme." They blinked. One nurse adjusted her scrunchie. "Sorry, Mr. Einstein. Didn't mean to offend." But it was too late. Einstein shuffled back to his room. The fire had returned. The kind that burned not in his muscles, but in his marrow. He slammed the Sudoku cereal box into the trash can and reached under his bed. There, wrapped in a Hello Kitty beach towel, was a notebook he hadn't opened in years. Its title, in faded German ink, read, "Things I shouldn't build but really want to." He flipped through diagrams, sketches, and mad dreams from long ago, pages covered in scribbles, rants, the occasional spaghetti stain, and one blueprint simply titled, "Jetpack, for emergency only." Einstein smiled. No more Sudoku. No more pudding diplomacy. No more being remembered as a soft-spoken man with wild hair and sleepy eyes. He was about to become the first 83-year-old to defy gravity, social norms, and Sunset Pine's visitation policy. But first, he needed batteries and duct tape. The next morning, Einstein began to plot. He woke at 5:12 a.m., when the home was quiet except for the soft breathing of dreams and the occasional moan from Harold in room 12, who believed he was haunted by the ghost of Isaac Newton. Einstein tiptoed past Velma the night nurse, who was snoring into a magazine titled Cats That Solve Crimes. He made his way to the kitchen, where he acquired exactly 17 butter wrappers, 2 whisks, and a large jug of prune juice. He called it Phase 1, fuel testing. Back in his room, he reactivated an old laptop powered by a hamster wheel. Not metaphorically. There was an actual hamster named Schrödinger who lived in a modified soup can and ran in circles every time someone said thermodynamics. Einstein ran simulations. He adjusted for wind resistance. He factored in the weight of his own disappointment. For days, he worked in secret. He disguised his test chambers as art projects. It's abstract expressionism, he told the staff. It represents the gravitational collapse of dignity. They nodded and gave him crayons. One afternoon, Gertrude from room 9 poked her head in. "What's that smell?" she asked. "Knowledge," Einstein replied, tightening a bolt on the duct-taped harness. Gertrude squinted. "Smells like burnt raisins." He waved her off. On day 10, Einstein strapped the prototype to his back and stood on his bed. He took a breath, whispered, "Got Werfelt nicked," and pressed the ignition. The jetpack sputtered, whined, and then exploded in a spectacular spray of prune-colored foam. He hit the ground with a soft oof and a louder, more German skies. Velma found him dazed, tangled in what used to be his curtain rod, and quietly muttering equations involving fruit velocity. They confiscated the jetpack. That night, as Einstein nursed his bruised ego and one sprained toe, he stared out the window. The moon was full. The stars glittered, and all he could think was, "I am not done." He remembered something Bohr once told him, shouted at him during a heated game of theoretical croquet. "You're not a man of age, Albert. You're a man of ignition." At the time, Einstein had dismissed it as poetic nonsense. But now it felt like prophecy. He would escape this place, not because he hated the soup, not because he despised the crossword puzzles where every answer was either nap or knitting, but because his mind, this rebellious, unruly, beautiful mind, refused to fade quietly. The next day, Einstein wrote a letter to the home's administration. "Dear Board, I am officially requesting the right to test personal anti-gravity equipment on the premises. I have conducted a full risk assessment and believe the koi pond can absorb most impacts. Respectfully, Dr. Einstein." He did not send it. Instead, he mailed it to NASA. 3 weeks later, he received a reply. "Dear Dr. Einstein, we appreciate your enthusiasm. Please stop sending us prune-scented envelopes. Sincerely, NASA Public Relations." Einstein chuckled. They hadn't said no. They'd said please stop, which was basically a maybe. By day 30, his room looked like a cross between a garage sale and a rejected Bond villain lair. Copper coils hung from the ceiling. There was a fan made of dentures, an umbrella that may or may not be alive, and a pillow embroidered with the words, "Time is relative. Naps are absolute." He had reconstructed the jetpack using parts from 3 broken toasters, a lava lamp, and the inner workings of a singing fish plaque he stole from the recreation room. This one was different. This one worked. Einstein stood once more on the bed, fists clenched, eyes burning. But he didn't launch. Not yet, because launching was for part 2. Right now, he just wanted the world to know. Albert Einstein, the old man in slippers, the Sudoku casualty, the forgotten genius in the back hall of Sunset Pines, was awake. And he was building something loud. Because equals MC squared isn't a meme. It's a warning. And he was about to remind the world what E really stands for. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. sharp, the universe inside Sunset Pines shifted. Time slowed. Gravity wobbled. Arguments over pudding were paused. Even Harold's ghost moans in room 12 hushed for just a moment, because it was bingo night. The sacred, the holy, the thunderous bingo night. It was the only time the elderly residents moved with anything close to purpose. Walkers rolled faster. Wheelchairs were turbo-boosted with tennis ball grips. Dentures were snapped in tighter. Even the resident parrot, Newton, practiced yelling bingo from his perch, though he mostly shouted it at 4 a.m., which made him both helpful and hated. And every week, Albert Einstein sat at the front table in his hedgehog slippers, staring at his bingo card like it was a quantum map of the cosmos. Einstein had a theory. Of course he did. That numbers weren't drawn randomly. That there was a pattern, a rhythm to the madness of bingo. He believed the numbers whispered their intentions, danced in a matrix of probability that only he could interpret. "I don't win by chance," he would murmur, adjusting his cardigan like a war general adjusting his medals. "I win by resonance." The others called it cheating. At first, it was just suspicion. Harriet noticed that Einstein always daubed his numbers a few milliseconds before the announcer even called them. Gregor complained that Einstein never looked at the board, he just stared at the shadows on the wall and marked things. And Mabel, who'd been playing bingo since World War II, claimed she once saw Einstein summon the number B12 by whispering into his prune juice. Einstein denied all of it. "It is not cheating," he said one night, placing a single prune on his card like a sacred talisman. "It is quantum synchronicity. The numbers want to find me. I simply let them." But Gertrude had had enough. The 91-year-old former codebreaker from the Cold War had been losing consistently for 5 Thursdays in a row. She wasn't just angry, she was plotting. On the 6th Thursday, she arrived with binoculars, a small mirror, and a tuna sandwich. The binoculars were for spying. The mirror was for signaling the staff. The tuna sandwich was, as she told everyone, emotional support. The game began. Einstein sat calm, serene, almost too serene. The announcer, a man named Chuck who used to sell insurance and now pronounced every letter like it owed him money, bellowed into the microphone. 4. Einstein daubed without blinking. 29. Einstein daubed again, casually sipping his prune cocktail. 38. Another daub. Not even a glance at the board. Gertrude's binoculars trembled. "I knew it," she hissed to Mabel. "He's reading the vibrations in the floor." Mabel nodded, or the humming of the light fixtures. Harold, who claimed to be psychic ever since he'd been struck by a falling ceiling tile, whispered, "He's using mind control." Classic German trick. By the time Einstein shouted, "Bingo!" for the 3rd round in a row, half the room erupted in protest. This is statistical sabotage. He's got microchips in his slippers. He bribed the parrot. Chuck paused the game. He adjusted his tie, looked over the cards, and frowned. "Dr. Einstein," he said carefully, "may I ask how you are winning every round?" Einstein stood. He placed his marker down gently, like a priest lowering a relic. "I am not winning. The universe is aligning. Probability is a suggestion. I merely listen to its echo." Chuck blinked. "So, you're cheating?" "I am interpreting." "You're banned." The room gasped. Newton the parrot gasped too, though it sounded more like a cough. "You cannot ban resonance," Einstein declared. "You can only fear it." But it was done. A laminated sign was placed near the card table. Bingo players must play fair. No quantum mechanics allowed. Einstein was devastated, not because he missed winning, but because he believed, truly, passionately, that bingo was a window into something larger, that hidden within the calls of G56 and O70 lay the chaotic dance of fate, entropy, and cosmic humor. He returned to his room that night, not with victory, but with exile. His slippers shuffled more slowly. His cardigan hung looser. Even Schrödinger the hamster, spinning in his wheel, paused to look at him with something resembling pity. Einstein sat in the dark. He stared at the corner of the ceiling, the one where the light bulb flickered every 11 seconds. "I was close," he whispered. "So close." A knock came at the door. Gertrude entered, not with gloating, but with something more dangerous, curiosity. "I brought you a peace offering," she said, holding up a fresh deck of playing cards. Einstein eyed her warily. "If this is about poker, I have a theory about bluffing using eyelid dilation." "No," she interrupted. "It's not a game. It's an idea." She sat. "Do you really think bingo isn't random?" she asked. "I know it," he replied. "The numbers hum before they're called. If you listen closely and understand the harmonics of coincidence, you can feel them approach." Gertrude smirked. "And what else can you feel approaching?" Einstein looked at her, then past her, then back to his notebook. "I feel something bigger," he said. "Something vast. A return to motion. I thought the jetpack would be the first step. But now, maybe bingo was the key. The signal. The catalyst." Gertrude leaned back. "You really are mad. Madness is just logic that hasn't been peer-reviewed." She chuckled. "So what now, Albert?" He stood. Slowly, the lights flickered again. Schrödinger squeaked. "Now," he said, "we build phase 2. The next morning, the retirement home buzzed with gossip. "Did you hear? Einstein's banned from bingo." He tried to smuggle in a laser pointer and a speaker that played whale noises. "I heard he tried to hypnotize the announcer." In truth, Einstein was not sulking. He was evolving. He turned his attention to other games. Bridge, Scrabble. No. But in every room, he was met with suspicion. No one trusted the man who could predict 3 moves ahead and spell quasar with only consonants. By the end of the week, he was labeled a game terrorist. The staff offered him extra pudding, an hour of TV privileges, even a coupon for 10% off at the gift shop. But Einstein waved it all away. They didn't understand. None of them did. Until one morning, a staff member found something strange in the hallway. A single bingo ball, glowing faintly, spinning without touching the floor. More appeared, B12 hovering in the stairwell, G49 rotating in the vending machine, O75 rolling across the fish tank and stopping exactly at 7:53 a.m., the precise moment Einstein had been banned. Gertrude noticed it first. "The numbers are haunting us." "No," Einstein corrected, emerging from behind a vending machine with goggles and prune juice in hand. "They are calling you. They are calling all of us. But only some can hear." The home tried to ignore it. They hid the balls, replaced them with new sets, even swapped the caller machine for a digital one. But it didn't matter. The numbers kept returning. A staff meeting was called. "Is he behind this?" asked Velma. "No proof," said Chuck, "but the fish now knows how to spell 33 in bubbles." Gertrude stood. "I believe him." "You would," snapped Mabel. "You're still sore from that tuna sandwich getting confiscated." Gertrude ignored her. She looked at Einstein, who was now sketching something involving magnetic fields, salt packets, and dentures. "He's not cheating. He's trying to unlock something." Einstein looked up. Not trying. Succeeding. The next bingo night, he didn't show. The players sat nervously. Every daub felt off. The numbers came slower. The air was heavier. Then a sound, low and strange, echoed through the halls. It was the unmistakable hum of resonance. The lights dimmed. The cards fluttered. And every resident's bingo card filled itself, all at once. The room screamed. Not in fear, but in awe. Every single player had a perfect card. Chuck dropped the microphone. Einstein appeared at the door. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "welcome to the multi-bingo." And then he bowed. He didn't play again after that. He didn't need to, because in the world of numbers, where fate rolls on 5 little balls and destiny is daubed in red ink, Albert Einstein had left his mark. He was no longer banned. But more importantly, he was no longer bored. And that, for the man in the hedgehog slippers, was the real victory. In most places, koi ponds are serene. They exist to bring peace, to make people say things like, "How tranquil," or "What a nice place to reflect." But the koi pond at Sunset Pines was different. It had secrets, And one of those secrets began to burble the moment Albert Einstein slipped on a wet stone and fell in headfirst. Now, Einstein didn't typically fall. His legs may have been shaky, but his mind was precise. But that morning, he had been chasing a floating bingo ball he swore was humming in Morse code, and in a single distracted moment, he stepped wrong, slipped, and vanished into the koi pond like a myth with bad balance. The splash alerted the entire courtyard. Gertrude, sipping warm milk and solving cryptograms with a pencil sharper than her attitude, rolled her eyes and ambled over with her walker. By the time they pulled him out, Einstein was soaked, coughing, and smiling. "I saw something," he wheezed. "Yes," said Velma. "You saw your dignity float away." "No," he insisted, pointing to the bottom of the pond. "There's something down there. The door." The residents scoffed. Chuck the bingo caller muttered something about dementia delusions. Even Newton the parrot gave a sarcastic squawk. But Gertrude froze. She turned her head slightly, like a cat hearing a long-forgotten song. "A door?" she asked quietly. Einstein nodded. It had numbers on it. Letters too. And the koi kept circling it in the Fibonacci sequence. "Impossible," she said, but she looked pale. That night, Einstein couldn't sleep. Not just because Harold was arguing with Newton about ghosts again, but because something had shifted. The koi pond wasn't just ornamental. It was guarding something. He had felt the ridges of the door beneath his palm. He had seen faint symbols through the algae, symbols that didn't belong in a retirement home. Symbols that looked suspiciously like the ones from his old Jetpack notebook. At 4 a.m., he snuck out. He carried a snorkel, a flashlight, and a jar of olives, just in case he got hungry mid-investigation. The koi pond was still. The water sparkled under the moonlight. He stepped in, shivering, and began to search. The cold stung his knees, but he pressed forward, sweeping his hand along the rocky bottom until his fingers brushed something metallic. The door. He pressed harder. It didn't budge. He twisted one of the koi-shaped stones nearby and heard a click. The pond bubbled. A whirlpool formed. And in a glorious, gurgling flourish, the water began to drain. Einstein stumbled back as the center of the pond spiraled downward, revealing a narrow stairwell covered in moss and metal. It descended into the earth like the entrance to an underground temple. He looked around. No one watching. He descended. The air grew warmer. The walls pulsed with the faint hum of electricity. There were lights, dim, green, flickering lights. The kind you'd expect in a Cold War bunker. The kind that said, "You probably shouldn't be here, but if you are, welcome." He reached the bottom. A curved steel door stood before him. On it, in faded tape, were the words, "Gertrude's Lab, since 1972. Knock first or be zapped." Einstein blinked. He knocked. The door creaked open, and he stepped into a different world. It was enormous, at least by retirement home standards. The walls were lined with monitors, half of them playing static, the other half looping the Lawrence Welk show. There were blueprints everywhere, chalkboards filled with equations that hadn't been written in decades. Suspended in one corner, held by wires and sheer confidence, was a partially assembled jetpack, bigger, bulkier, and far more dangerous looking than his own. And in the center of it all stood Gertrude, wearing a lab coat and welding goggles. She didn't look surprised. "Took you long enough," she said. Einstein stared. "You have a lab, under the koi pond." Gertrude smirked. "Built it after Watergate. Didn't trust anybody after that. I needed a place to think." "But why a koi pond?" "It keeps the pigeons away." Einstein wandered the room in awe. There were prototypes for robotic slippers, an electric prune peeler, and a machine that looked suspiciously like a lie detector attached to a spoon. He approached the jetpack. "You were working on this?" "Still am," she said. "Built the first model in 1983. Nearly vaporized the shuffleboard court." "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's volatile," she corrected. "One wrong burst and you're in orbit." Einstein reached into a drawer labeled, "Very forbidden, no touchy." Inside, he found something glowing. It was a tomato, pulsing softly, redder than red. Not just ripe, radiant. Why is this tomato glowing? Gertrude sighed. That's not a tomato. That's Project Nightshade. It absorbs light, stores energy. If you put it near the jetpack, it'll either power it for 10 hours or explode in 2 seconds. Einstein set it down very carefully. I must say, he breathed, This is more than I ever imagined. Gertrude pulled off her goggles. I always knew you'd find it. You've been poking around the edges for weeks. Plus, Schrödinger the hamster keeps drawing blueprints in the sawdust. You trained him well. Einstein chuckled. He's smarter than half the staff. They sat, in silence, in wonder, and then Einstein asked the question that had been burning in him for months. Why? Gertrude looked at the jetpack, at the blinking lights, at the dusty machine labeled Time Whisperer 3000 that hadn't worked since 1986. Because, she said, I got tired of being still. Einstein nodded. I used to chase equations like children chase fireflies, she continued. But one day, someone handed me a pillbox and said, slow down. And I did. For too long. And now I want to see the sky. Not through a window, not in a painting, but by falling into it. Einstein stood. Then let's finish it. Gertrude smiled. Together. Together. And from that night on, the koi pond became something more. It became a hatch to freedom, a door to rebellion, and the 2 oldest troublemakers in Sunset Pines began building something extraordinary. They soldered, they programmed, they argued about lift velocity and fiber density. They spilled prune juice on blueprints and debated whether humming show tunes helped circuits align. Einstein brought quantum theory. Gertrude brought duct tape and rage. Together, they rebuilt the jetpack. Stronger, sleeker, with a glowing tomato as its unpredictable heart. They called it Operation Skylark. 1 week later, the koi began swimming in perfect circles again. Not because of the moon, but because they sensed it. The air was changing. The old were rising. And above them all, hidden under lilies and fake frogs, the lab pulsed with purpose. A new age of ridiculous rebellion had begun. There's a particular kind of silence that settles in a retirement home at 3:15 a.m. Not quite peace, not quite gloom, but the sound of memories sleeping. But down below Sunset Pines, beneath the koi pond and decades of secrecy, there was no silence at all. There was buzzing, clicking, grinding, and occasional cursing in German. In the hidden lab, under a flickering fluorescent light, Albert Einstein and Gertrude were knee-deep in something no one had attempted before, engineering airborne rebellion using only what they could steal, scavenge, or sweet-talk out of the nurse's supply cart. Their goal was clear: the first successful senior citizen jetpack escape in history. Their mission? To soar beyond putting night, to rise above bedtime, to feel wind in their hair and freedom in their joints. But first, they needed forks. Lots of them. Einstein had spent 2 days quietly hoarding them from the cafeteria. Not just any forks, he was specific. Only the ones that hummed slightly when you flicked them. He claimed they resonated with a particular frequency that made them ideal for aerodynamic stabilization. Gertrude thought he just liked the noise. Either way, they now had a bucket full of forks and a bold plan. The forks would form the spine of the stabilizer grid, the part of the jetpack that kept it from spinning wildly like a shopping cart with one broken wheel. They also served as conductors, channeling energy from the core, a blender modified to spin backwards at 3,000 RPMs, to the lift array, which was powered by a battery made entirely of melted hearing aids. Einstein stared at the blueprint, licking prune jelly from his finger. I still say we need a flux anchor, he muttered. Gertrude rolled her eyes. Flux anchors don't exist. They will eventually. We have forks. Use the forks. He sighed and adjusted his welding goggles, which he'd made from old sunglasses and a pair of prescription bifocals. The lab table was a mess. Empty prune cans, charred copper wire, 2 melted dentures. And in the middle of it all, blinking, humming, absurdly optimistic, was the growing skeleton of the jetpack. The casing was a hollowed-out karaoke machine. The core was a kitchen blender fused with 2 hand mixers and what they hoped was not a pacemaker. The exhaust nozzles were a pair of recycled clarinet bells. Einstein claimed they created better resonance. Gertrude thought they looked cool. But they had a problem. After their last test, in which the prototype caught fire and Newton the parrot yelled, "Mayday," for 3 hours, they knew they needed better thermal regulation. They needed something small, durable, and already used to handling unpredictable environments. That's when Einstein had an idea so strange, so reckless, so delightfully unhinged, that only someone with a Nobel Prize and nothing left to lose would even suggest it. "Dentures," he said. Gertrude blinked. "Excuse me? Thermal regulators. Dentures. Think about it. Flexible. Tough. Molded to endure pressure and temperature swings. If they can survive Harold's mouth, they can survive anything." "You're serious? I'm 83, building a flying machine in a koi bunker. I've never been more serious." And so, the hunt for dentures began. They started by visiting the laundry room lost and found. Apparently, people lost teeth more than you'd expect. By the end of the day, they had 7 pairs of spare dentures, one set made of gold, and another that still played Beethoven's Ninth when you bit down. Gertrude retrofitted them into a cooling ring. 2 upper jaws and 1 lower set fused around the exhaust chamber, creating a makeshift heat dispersal array. Einstein tested it by lighting a marshmallow on fire and holding it near the jetpack space. It didn't melt. Success. "Dentures work," he whispered. "God help us all." From that moment, progress became a whirlwind. Every night, they assembled in the lab. Einstein with his notes, Gertrude with her soldering iron. They bickered, they laughed, they argued over voltage and baking soda ratios. They used rubber bands for suspension, tennis balls as shock absorbers, and glued cotton from 33 Q-tips into the intake valves to filter air. They even installed a prune juice dispenser in the side. For hydration, Einstein claimed. And still, the jetpack grew. It gained shape, personality, rhythm. It hummed like a song no one had heard before, but everyone somehow recognized. It smelled faintly of motor oil, cinnamon, and rebellion. By week 3, it was nearly done. But then came a disaster. One morning, Velma the nurse discovered Einstein's slipper stuck in the door to the koi pond. She narrowed her eyes. She'd always been suspicious of him, ever since he installed a sundial in the lounge and told people it predicted bingo winners. She peeked into the pond, saw nothing, but her instincts itched. That night, the lab went on red alert. Gertrude set up a motion sensor made from an old pager and 3 buttons from her cardigan. Einstein booby-trapped the stairwell with cans of peaches on fishing line. But it wasn't enough. Velma returned. And this time, she brought a flashlight. Einstein saw the beam before she entered. He grabbed the jetpack. Gertrude hit the emergency switch. The lights cut. Alarms whined. Newton screamed, "Intruder!" even though no one had invited him. They had seconds. Einstein hauled the jetpack into a hidden chamber behind the glowing tomato storage. Gertrude confronted Velma at the entrance, feigning confusion, holding a jar of pickles like it was a sacred relic. "This area's off limits," Velma barked. "I was looking for my knitting needles," Gertrude said flatly. "At the bottom of a koi pond? They go wherever the truth is." Velma narrowed her eyes. She couldn't prove anything. She left. Einstein emerged from the shadows, hair wilder, eyes sharper. "We have to move faster," he said. Gertrude agreed. They worked double shifts. Einstein gave up Sudoku. Gertrude canceled her subscription to Spy Magazine Weekly. Schrödinger the hamster was given motivational speeches. At last, on a Tuesday that smelled of rain and rebellion, the jetpack was ready. It stood tall, proud, and absurd. Silver metal patched with duct tape. Forks gleaming along its spine. The denture cooling ring glowing faintly from within. A button labeled, "Do Not Press," stuck prominently on the front. Einstein's idea, mostly to tempt fate. They both stared at it. "Well?" Gertrude asked. Einstein smiled. "I think it's time we make physics jealous." If anyone had asked the staff of Sunset Pines what their biggest concern was on a typical Thursday, they might have said something like Harold hiding scrambled eggs in his slippers again, or the parrot rewiring the intercom. But no one, absolutely no one, would have guessed the real answer that week. Butterscotch pudding. It started innocently enough. A subtle hum. A whisper of metal moving behind walls. The koi fish in the pond began swimming in synchronized pentagons. Schrödinger the hamster refused to run unless Beethoven was playing. These were the signs. Warnings, really. But no one paid attention, because they were all too distracted by the flyer on the bulletin board. Pudding night, 400 cups. 4 flavors. 1 destiny. The words were printed in Comic Sans. The kind of font that told you something unserious was about to get far too serious. Einstein had posted the flyer himself. He walked the halls with an air of serenity, his cardigan freshly lint-rolled, his hedgehog slippers squeaking in symmetrical rhythm. He nodded at Velma the nurse, who squinted in return. He winked at the parrot. He even offered Harold a spoonful of mashed peas. Harold screamed and claimed Einstein was trying to poison him, but Einstein was in too deep now to care. Because this wasn't just pudding night. This was escape attempt number 1. He and Gertrude had run simulations, sketched diagrams, created a master plan so detailed that even Newton the parrot had stopped shouting, "Bingo!" long enough to nod in approval. Every contingency was accounted for, every variable controlled, except for the pudding. You see, the idea was simple. While the residents were busy stuffing themselves with pudding, Einstein would sneak into the courtyard, fire up the jetpack hidden beneath the koi pond, and take off before anyone noticed. But simple things rarely go as planned when pudding is involved. First came the pudding preparation. Einstein needed 400 cups of butterscotch pudding delivered to the dining hall all at once. Not over time, not in batches. He wanted them released in one singular, glorious wave. When questioned, he simply said, "It's for the birthday of Isaac Newton. We're reenacting gravity." No one really understood, but the chef, Mr. Blemish, a man with a mustache so large it needed its own walker, agreed. He was flattered that someone wanted to use his pudding for performance art. Meanwhile, Gertrude worked underground. She had rewired the pudding carts, fused them with the motorized remains of 3 wheelchairs and the fan from a broken ceiling unit. She added a simple trigger, a remote made from a modified TV remote, and a banana. Why a banana? Einstein had asked. In case someone finds it. No one suspects a banana, Gertrude replied. The night of the launch arrived. Sunset Pines was electric with anticipation. Residents wore bibs with stars on them. Some wore hats. Others simply drooled in readiness. The dining room was decorated with string lights that blinked at odd intervals. Einstein had programmed them to flash in Morse code. "Tonight we rise." He sat at table 5. Focused. Gertrude wheeled in late, carrying what appeared to be a bag of knitting supplies but was actually spare stabilizer rods and prune-flavored jet fuel capsules. And then, the pudding arrived. It rolled in on 3 gleaming carts. 400 perfectly sealed cups. Butterscotch, shiny and trembling, like edible gold in plastic thrones. The crowd gasped. Someone wept. Mr. Blemish raised a ladle. "Let the pudding begin." At that exact moment, Einstein looked at Gertrude. She gave a single nod. He reached under the table and peeled the banana. Silently, secretly, he pressed the button on its stem. The pudding carts began to shake. The first cart spun slightly, knocking over a salt shaker. The second cart let out a low mechanical growl. The third cart exploded, not in flames, but in pudding. A geyser of butterscotch erupted into the air, splattering ceiling tiles, dentures, and 3 wigs. The second cart followed, its wheels screeching as it spun and released a tornado of dessert. The first cart, perhaps confused, launched itself into the salad bar and sprayed pudding across the entire west wall in a magnificent arc of sweet chaos. Residents screamed. Some in joy, others in lactose fear. Harold dove under the table shouting, "The revolution has begun." Einstein stood up in the swirl of flying pudding. It was time. While chaos reigned above, he slipped from the dining hall, gliding past overturned walkers and a horrified Velma who had taken a pudding hit to the glasses. He reached the koi pond in record time, opened the secret hatch beneath the largest lily pad, and descended into the lab. Gertrude was waiting. She had the jetpack ready. The ignition sequence lit up. Einstein strapped himself in. The machine hummed with purpose. "I'm going," he said. Gertrude adjusted his collar. "Fly far. I'll send postcards." "I hate postcards." "Exactly." She grinned. He took a breath. He pressed the ignition. And then everything went wrong. It wasn't the forks. They hummed beautifully. It wasn't the dentures. They held strong. It was the blender. It jammed. The moment the lift began, the prune juice dispenser overloaded. The prune velocity regulator failed. The banana remote, still active in his pocket, triggered a backup pudding release right into the propulsion chamber. And instead of launching into the sky, Einstein shot sideways. Through a ventilation shaft, through a linen closet, through the ceiling tiles of the kitchen, and finally, into the soup. More specifically, into a vat of steaming carrot pea puree being stirred by Mr. Blemish, who screamed and dropped his ladle into the blaze of broth. The soup exploded upward like lava from a culinary volcano. Einstein emerged, coughing, drenched in soup, goggles fogged, dignity nowhere in sight. The residents, covered in pudding and fear, watched as he stumbled into the dining room again, dripping vegetable regret, jetpack wheezing. Velma gasped. "He's soup-powered." Harold stood up. "It's soup science." Einstein tried to speak. Instead, he burped a bubble of steam. The room fell silent. Then someone clapped. Just once. Then twice. Then everyone. Pudding-soaked hands applauded. Laughter rose like applause from the gods of dessert. Even the parrot whistled. The moment became legend. Einstein, too stunned to respond, bowed slightly and collapsed into a chair. The jetpack sparked, sputtered, and died. Gertrude wheeled in behind him. "Well," she said, eyeing the soup on his lap, "I suppose you flew." "Briefly." "Gracefully?" "Not even a little." She sighed. "Back to the lab?" He nodded. And so, the great pudding escape ended not in triumph, but in broth. The jetpack was damaged. The staff had suspicions. The pudding would never be trusted again. But something had changed. Einstein had tasted flight, even if it came with carrots. And the residents? They saw something more than soup. They saw the old man in hedgehog slippers try to escape gravity itself. And they cheered, not because he failed, but because he tried. Sunset Pines had many oddities. There was Harold, who spoke to ghosts and threw sandwiches at pigeons. There was the parrot Newton, who recited chess moves backwards. There was a vending machine that only dispensed root beer when you whispered entropy. But none of them, not even Einstein's exploding jetpack pudding incident, prepared the residents for the strange, thumping arrival of the man the nurses called simply Professor Boombox. It began on a Monday morning. The air smelled of tuna and mothballs. Birds circled above like they sensed trouble. A storm was coming, not from the sky, but from the east wing of Sunset Pines. From room 7C. The music came first. Not soft, soothing flute music. Not harp melodies. No, this was Beethoven, fused with bass drops so heavy they made the flower pots tremble. It wasn't just loud. It was calculated, aggressively intellectual. Symphony No. 9 met techno in a head-on collision of rhythm and rebellion. The walls shook. Nurses panicked. The power flickered as if the home itself wasn't sure how to respond. Einstein sat in the courtyard reading a blueprint when the first bass hit. He paused. A strange glint flickered in his eyes. "That," he whispered, "sounds familiar." The next day, the music returned, louder. This time with what sounded like a vocoded scream of quantum funk. Velma stormed into room 7C with the rage of a woman denied her 3 o'clock yogurt. She emerged 15 seconds later looking pale and confused. "He's back," she muttered. "He's alive." Einstein rushed to her. "Who?" he asked. "Who is alive?" She trembled. "The Dane, the recluse, the one who went full avant-garde." Einstein gasped. "No." She nodded. "Just Niels Bohr." The name rippled through the halls like a cold wind. Einstein hadn't heard it in years. Niels Bohr. His old rival, his old friend, his old headache, the man who once wore a tuxedo to a particle accelerator launch and claimed he could taste radiation, the man who argued that electrons were just ideas wearing hats, the man who vanished 20 years ago into retirement and was presumed to have transcended into pure theory, and now, apparently, lived in 7C. Einstein went immediately. He found the room unlocked, the door pulsing with bass like a living heart. Inside, it was dark except for flashing lights and the soft glow of a lava lamp shaped like a hydrogen atom. Bohr sat in the middle of it all, in a motorized wheelchair modified with speakers, neon lights, and what looked suspiciously like a fog machine. His beard was longer. His eyebrows had evolved. His lab coat was covered in mathematical graffiti. He looked like a DJ who took apart atoms in his spare time. Einstein cleared his throat. Bohr turned. The music stopped. "Albert," Bohr said, grinning, "you look slower." "And you look like a rave got lost in a physics lecture," Einstein replied. They stared at each other. Then they laughed. The kind of laugh only old friends can have. The kind layered with history, competition, and unresolved debates about quantum field theory. Bohr wheeled forward. "I heard about the jetpack," he said. Einstein raised an eyebrow. "You did?" The pudding explosion made the news. Apparently, it trended under geriatric uprising. "I liked it. Strong branding." Einstein smirked. "We're rebuilding. The soup damaged the stabilizer." Bohr leaned in. "I want in." Einstein blinked. "You. I may be 92 and powered by prune smoothies, but I still remember lift mechanics and resonance propulsion. Plus," he said, pulling out a strange device, "I built this." It looked like a cross between a slingshot, a compass, and a sandwich. "What is it?" Einstein asked. "Atmospheric rhythm synchronizer. It measures the mood of the air. Very useful for flight paths. Also makes toast." Einstein was impressed and slightly hungry. "But why now?" he asked. "Why come out of hiding?" Bohr's smile faded. "Because I've seen what happens to men like us when we stop moving. We decay. Not in body, in purpose. I tried sitting still. I tried bingo. I even tried knitting. But the universe whispers in our ears, Albert. It tells us to keep reaching. And now, you've given me something to reach for again." Einstein nodded slowly. He extended a hand. "Welcome aboard, Bohr." And just like that, the escape crew doubled in madness. The next few weeks were chaos in the best way. Bohr converted his wheelchair into a mobile lab. He played classical remixes at strategic frequencies to test air resonance. He taught Schrödinger the hamster how to run to the beat of a metronome. He created a new propulsion algorithm based on flight patterns and interpretive dance. Gertrude wasn't thrilled at first. He turned the lab into a discotheque. "He's brilliant," Einstein replied. "He replaced my soldering iron with a glow stick." Einstein smiled. "And yet, the jetpack has never looked better." Together, the trio was unstoppable. Einstein handled the design. Gertrude managed stability. Bohr brought chaos. They tested new materials, upgraded the fork alignment, reinforced the denture ring. Bohr even added a bass boost switch that could, in theory, shatter the windows of the nursing station if flipped mid-flight. It was glorious, until Velma returned. She stood at the koi pond one morning, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, suspicious glare engaged. "Something's going on," she muttered. She noticed the koi were now swimming in musical tempo. She noticed the parrot had started saying, "Lift of T-10. She noticed a faint smell of ozone, prunes, and ambition in the air. And then she noticed Bohr, zooming down the hallway in his flashing wheelchair, playing Ode to Joy, remixed with beatboxing. She sighed. Of course. Einstein knew time was short. They needed a second escape attempt. This time with Bohr, better thrusters, and fewer pudding casualties. The jetpack was ready. Bohr had synchronized it with atmospheric rhythm sensors. Gertrude had engineered a deployable glider just in case. Even Schrödinger had a helmet now. But the biggest upgrade? Speakers. Because Bohr insisted, if they were going to fly, they had to do it to music. loud, rebellious, ridiculous music. And so, the plan was made. One night, when the moon was high and the pudding had been cleared, the koi pond would open again. 3 old minds, 1 glowing tomato, and a dream. To defy gravity, to flip time the bird, to remind the world that age is just a number with a jetpack. If someone were to walk through Sunset Pines on a quiet Tuesday evening, they might hear the distant sound of shuffleboard. They might smell tomato soup and lavender hand cream. They might even hear the parrot Newton yelling, "The mitochondria is the powerhouse," to no one in particular. But if they happen to lean a little closer to the koi pond, just close enough to hear the hum below, they might catch a whisper of something far stranger, an argument about jet fuel. In the secret lab beneath the pond, Einstein, Gertrude, and Bohr stood around the jetpack like ancient wizards studying a magical artifact that refused to behave. The frame was complete. The stabilizers were ready. The denture-based heat regulator had proven shockingly reliable, and Schrödinger the hamster had even stopped biting the wiring. But there was a problem. Fuel. Their last attempt, powered by soup and high hopes, had resulted in Einstein being launched sideways into the kitchen, nearly causing a diplomatic incident with the tapioca committee. So now they needed real fuel. Sustainable, potent, explosive, ideally without catching their hair on fire. Gertrude suggested battery acid. Bohr suggested lightning. Einstein, however, had a theory. He sat at the edge of the lab in his hedgehog slippers, scribbling numbers on a notepad that smelled faintly of vinegar and regret. Combustion, he muttered, requires more than power. It requires principle, purpose, anger even. Gertrude blinked. "You want to run the jetpack on emotion?" "No," Einstein said, grinning. "I want to run it on the 3 most potent elements available to the elderly: prunes, cola, and unfiltered rage." Bohr leaned forward. "You're mad." "I'm inspired." "That's what madness sounds like." Einstein stood. "Trust me, I've done the math. If we ferment prunes for 36 hours, mix them with flat cola, and stir in the residual fury of being charged $12 for orthopedic socks, we'll have the most volatile organic propulsion system known to mankind." Gertrude crossed her arms. "Where do we find rage?" Einstein smiled. "I'll go visit Harold." 3 hours later, Einstein returned with a mason jar of liquid so dark it made chocolate milk look insecure. He set it on the lab table with reverence. "What's in it?" "Forest, prunes, coal, a pinch of cinnamon," and one long, angry rant from Harold about why the bingo schedule favors people with better hearing. Bohr sniffed the jar and immediately took a step back. "It smells like memory loss and rebellion." "Exactly." They called it Formula Boom. It fizzed slightly when shaken. It growled when stirred. And when Gertrude accidentally spilled a drop on the floor, it ate through the linoleum, muttered something in Latin, and left a scorch mark shaped like a middle finger. Perfect. They poured it into the fuel chamber slowly. Einstein wore a welding mask. Gertrude wore oven mitts. Bohr wore sunglasses that doubled as 3D glasses from an old drive-in movie. Safety, after all, was relative. The jetpack hissed. It purred, and then it began to hum. Not electronically, musically. It began to sing, softly, hauntingly, the opening bars of Ride of the Valkyries. Bohr looked alarmed. "Is it supposed to do that?" "No," Einstein said, "but I'm choosing to be impressed." The lights in the lab flickered. Schrödinger the hamster climbed to the top of his wheel and stared in awe. They stepped back. Gertrude grabbed the ignition remote. Bohr took notes using a pen he swore was made from meteorite ink. Einstein gave a nod. Gertrude pressed the button. The jetpack lifted off the workbench. Not fast, not smooth, but proudly. It hovered, spun gently, and released a puff of prune-scented steam. Success. And then it exploded. Not into flames, into energy. The room shook. The walls trembled. And Bohr, standing too close to the exhaust, was hit full in the face with a blast of Formula Boom. The music stopped. Silence. And then Bohr blinked. His pupils dilated. He tilted his head. And then, in a voice no one had ever heard from him before, he said, "Screech." Okay. Tick-tick-char. Einstein paused. Did you just speak raccoon? Bohr tilted his head again. Click here. Sigigigigigay. Gertrude squinted. That's definitely raccoon. Fluent, Einstein said. Impressive. Unexpected. Possibly permanent. They sat him down. Bohr blinked rapidly, then began organizing tools by the number of vowels in their name. Einstein scratched his beard. There's a chance the emotional resonance overloaded his neural pathways. Or the prune-cola rage mix opened a new part of his brain, Gertrude added. Or he's just being dramatic, Einstein muttered. Bohr suddenly stood up and began scratching at the cabinets. Definitely raccoon. Gertrude poured him some chamomile tea. Bohr sniffed it, hissed, and climbed under the lab table. All right, Einstein said, sighing. New plan. While Bohr nested under a blanket made of emergency tinfoil, Einstein and Gertrude reviewed the data. The jetpack had flown. Briefly, the fuel had worked. Violently. And the explosion hadn't destroyed anything that wasn't already unstable. So, all in all a win. Einstein began tweaking the fuel ratios. Less cola, he said. More cinnamon. And no shouting at the jar during mixing, Gertrude added. We need the rage to ferment, not implode. Bohr, now sitting quietly and eating dry cereal with his hands, seemed to be calming down. Einstein approached him gently. Bohr, buddy, can you understand me? Bohr looked up. E equals MC Stuka. Einstein smiled. Close enough. By the end of the week, they had refined the formula. The new batch was more stable, less likely to cause linguistic side effects. It still glowed faintly. It still vibrated, but now it sang in harmony, not defiance. Bohr began speaking English again, though with a strange accent and a tendency to purr at squirrels. Einstein considered it a net improvement. The jetpack was reassembled. Gertrude reinforced the denture ring with bits of titanium plucked from a discarded walker. They tested again, and this time, it soared. Not far, not fast, but high enough to knock Newton off his perch and set off the motion sensor that controlled the hallway lights. It was glorious. Einstein floated for 3 full seconds before gently landing in a pile of spare pillows. Bohr cheered. Gertrude cried. Even Schrödinger rolled in celebration. The formula worked. The dream was alive. Escape was possible. They had their jetpack. They had their team. And now they had fuel. Prunes. Coal. And the rage of forgotten geniuses. They called it Flight by Fury. And it was just the beginning. At 2 a.m., the world at Sunset Pines was fast asleep. Harold was snoring in Morse code again. Gertrude was power napping with one eye open. The parrot, Newton, had finally stopped yelling thermodynamics and settled for whispering ominous Latin phrases. The hallways were still. The pudding carts were recharging. The cameras were blinking in their usual lazy rhythm. But beneath the surface of this piece, this fragile, prune-scented piece, something extraordinary was about to happen. Because Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr had officially decided it was time to hover. Not walk, not wheel, not shuffle in orthopedic shoes. Hover. They'd done the math. They'd tested the propulsion. They'd perfected the formula boom fuel down to the precise mix of prunes, cola, and post-retirement fury. The denture ring had been reinforced with bits of a titanium walker. The stabilizers, fashioned from cafeteria forks and violin strings, had passed the stress test by surviving a direct slap from Gertrude's rage spatula. All they needed now was to fly. Not fly away just yet. No, that was later. Tonight was a test. A gentle lift. A whisper of altitude. Something modest. Dignified. Preferably indoors. Which is why they chose the main hallway of Sunset Pines. Smooth floors. Long runway. Excellent ceiling clearance. And, unfortunately, a direct line of sight to the sacred bingo board. Einstein stood at the end of the hallway, wearing the jetpack like a king donning armor. His goggles fogged slightly from excitement. Bohr, just behind him, was seated in his modified wheelchair, which now had winglets and a stereo system that only played Beethoven's Fifth with dubstep undertones. Gertrude stood as lookout, armed with a flashlight, a stopwatch, and a signed waiver from Schrödinger the hamster, who refused to participate unless there were snacks. Einstein tightened the last strap. "Are we ready?" he asked. Bohr nodded. "The rhythm is perfect. The air is clear. The pudding reserves are sealed. Let's hover." Gertrude raised a hand. "On my count. 3, 2, ignite." Einstein pressed the button. The jetpack roared. Not like thunder, more like a choir of angry kitchen appliances. The forks rattled in harmony. The denture ring-whirred like a retired turbine. Prune steam hissed from the side vents. The neon "Do Not Press" button glowed menacingly, as it always did. Then Einstein lifted. Gently, gloriously, 2 feet off the ground. His slippers dangled. His hair danced. His cardigan flapped like an intellectual cape. "I'm hovering," he shouted. Bohr hooped from behind. "Increase lift. Show gravity who's boss." Einstein pressed forward. The jetpack tilted. He floated 5 feet now. Then 7. The hallway shimmered in prune-scented heat waves. And then Bohr pressed his launch sequence. His wheelchair's propulsion system kicked in with a sound best described as celestial blender. He shot forward, almost gracefully, propelled by 4 mini-turbines and pure musical energy. Together, they hovered. 2 old men. 2 brilliant minds. 1 hallway, defying age, physics, and Sunset Pines protocol. They high-fived midair. The force of that high-five would later be studied by scientists for years. Some claimed it caused a brief fluctuation in the Earth's magnetic field. Others said it made one of the koi fish below start blinking in binary. But none of them predicted what came next. Einstein, overwhelmed with joy, tried a barrel roll. Bohr shouted something in Danish and activated bass boost mode. The hallway lights flickered. The bingo board, the holiest of artifacts in Sunset Pines, began to shake. They were hovering directly toward it. Gertrude screamed, "Pull up!" But it was too late. Einstein's left slipper clipped the edge of the scoreboard. Bohr's speaker system hit full decibel. And in a moment that felt like the collapse of a very fragile universe, the jetpack spiraled sideways, took a sharp right turn, and slammed, at exactly 3.1 miles per hour, into the sacred bingo board. Time, metaphorically speaking, shattered. The board exploded into a fluttering shower of laminated numbers, magnetic letters, and crumpled dream tokens. G49 shot across the room like a hockey puck. O72 embedded itself into a ceiling tile. The bulb that always flickered stopped flickering and started blinking in Morse code again. Einstein tumbled to the ground with a grunt and a puff of prune fog. Bohr crashed sideways into a vending machine, which in turn exploded and dispensed 34 root beers, a granola bar, and a mysterious card labeled "Free Visit to the Afterlife, One-Time Use Only." They lay there, stunned, silent. Gertrude walked over, shining her flashlight down at them like a disappointed lighthouse. "Well," she said, "that was majestic." Einstein groaned. "Did I hover?" "You hovered," she said, helping him sit up. Bohr rolled over. "We achieved at least 7.8 seconds of gravitational defiance. Also, I think I discovered a new form of flight-induced language. I swear the vending machine just whispered in Esperanto." Einstein grinned through the bruises. "The math was correct. Your barrel roll," Bohr added, "was not." "I panicked," Einstein replied. "I was excited. I'm not used to my shoes leaving the floor." Gertrude examined the damage. The bingo board was totaled. The hallway smelled like burnt fruit. A nurse had wandered halfway out of her break room, seen the wreckage, and simply backed away, deciding she needed none of this. "It's official," Gertrude said. "You two have declared war on retirement." Einstein nodded. "And we're winning." They returned to the lab before dawn. Bohr's chair squeaked now. The speakers had melted slightly. Einstein's hair had puffed to a level considered hazardous by 3 different scientific committees. But they were alive, energized. The hover had worked. Despite the crash, despite the collateral damage, despite the fact that Newton was now demanding hazard pay in crackers, it had worked. The dream lived. They made tea. Gertrude poured prune whiskey into hers. Einstein laid the new calculations on the table, marked with soot and soup stains. Bohr repaired his winglets while humming something suspiciously like ABBA. "You realize," Gertrude said, "that Velma will notice the board's gone." Einstein nodded. "We blame the parrot. Newton doesn't have arms. He doesn't need them. He has influence." Bohr leaned back. "I say we move up the escape." Einstein looked at him. Soon, Bohr said. "We've hovered. We've crashed. All that's left now is flight." Gertrude sighed. "You're going to need more prunes." Einstein raised his teacup. "We're going to need a legacy." Somewhere deep in the records of a long-forgotten Cold War archive, tucked beneath classified reports and folders labeled, "Do not open without tinfoil hat," there exists a file. Subject: Velma. Codename: Nightingale. Former operative, CIA Division 12B, covert nursing and espionage tactics. Known for extracting state secrets using a clipboard, a steely glare, and warm pudding. Rumored, once interrogated Nixon's cat. Successfully. Retired, officially. Reactivated only when bingo integrity is threatened. At Sunset Pines, she is known simply as Nurse Velma. Hair tight in a bun so severe it may have classified clearance. Shoes that make no sound when she walks. Glasses that catch light in just the right way to send a shiver down your spine. She administers medications with the precision of a military drone and monitors putting inventory with the paranoia of a man guarding gold. For the most part, she leaves the residents alone. She tolerates mutterings about ghosts and lost socks. She even forgave Harold for claiming she was a lizard spy from Neptune. But when the bingo board exploded, she activated. That morning, Einstein awoke to a strange stillness. Not the usual peaceful stillness of retired life. This was a conspiratorial stillness. The koi weren't swimming in Fibonacci spirals. Schrödinger the hamster had flipped his food bowl upside down, which was Morse code for incoming. And Newton the parrot? He was silent. Einstein sat up in his bed. Something was wrong. And then he saw it. The clipboard. On his bedside table. A note clipped in place. "You can run, Einstein, but not faster than the truth. V." He stood, hurried to the koi pond, opened the secret hatch, and gasped. The lab was spotless, clean, sanitized, deactivated. Gone were the tools, the schematics, the glowing tomato. Even the denture cooling ring had vanished. And worst of all, so had the jetpack. Gertrude arrived minutes later, clutching her emergency teacup and muttering obscenities in 3 languages. "She took it," Einstein said. Gertrude didn't ask who. She knew. Velma. The one nurse in the building who kept her stethoscope in a fingerprint-locked briefcase. The one who once scanned a crossword puzzle for micronotes. The one who had never blinked. Not once. Documented. Bohr wheeled in moments later, music blaring from his onboard stereo. He took one look at the empty lab, paused the bass, and whispered, "We've been compromised." Einstein nodded grimly. "She's on to us." Bohr growled. "The pigeon was right." Einstein raised an eyebrow. "What pigeon?" Bohr didn't answer. They regrouped in the laundry room, the only place Velma wouldn't enter due to an unfortunate incident involving a robe dryer, 2 ferrets, and a lost nuclear key. There, surrounded by static cling and lint filter conspiracies, the trio plotted. "We need eyes," Gertrude said. "We need intel," Bohr added. "We need pudding," Einstein muttered. "I think better with pudding." But pudding would have to wait, because Velma wasn't just hiding the jetpack. She was studying it. In room 22B, which everyone thought was a janitor's closet but was actually her old CA lab, Velma had the jetpack on full display. She was already 3 steps ahead. She had a whiteboard covered in theories, strings, and a picture of Einstein's hedgehog slippers circled in red ink. A large monitor displayed the words, "Project Lift Fossil." She paced. She observed. She poked the denture ring with tweezers and whispered, "Clever. Very clever." Then she turned to her cat. "Do you think it's stable, Mr. Whiskers?" The cat blinked once, meowed twice, then resumed sharpening its claws on a Cold War file folder labeled Bohr, Threat Level Medium High. Meanwhile, Einstein was losing patience. "She's dissecting it," he growled. "She's dismantling our dream." "We need a plan," Bohr said. "I say we go old school," Gertrude chimed in. "Distraction, diversion, retaliation. Or," Bohr added, "we simply outwit her." Einstein leaned forward. "Velma is not like the others. You can't just outsmart her. You have to outweird her." So they did. That afternoon, Velma found a trail of pudding leading from the koi pond to the vending machine. A decoy. Inside the vending machine, she found a hamster in a tiny hat saluting her. That night, her room was flooded with Beethoven remixes mixed with chicken clucks and dolphin squeaks. Bohr's personal mix. Code name, Symphony of Nonsense. At dawn, she received a letter written entirely in symbols, part Egyptian, part Klingon, part ancient Sudoku. But Velma didn't flinch. She narrowed her eyes. She picked up her phone. She dialed. "Activate Protocol 47, she said. 2 hours later, a man in sunglasses arrived. His name tag said Phil, but his aura said danger. He wheeled in a suitcase marked classified incontinence supplies. Inside was a laptop, a headset, and a printout of Einstein's handwriting from 1921. Velma said only one word, decrypt. But Einstein had anticipated this. The document was encoded in musical notation. Bohr's job. Velma stared at the page. It began to play Mozart's Requiem when scanned. "This is psychological warfare," she muttered. Back in the courtyard, the trio watched through binoculars. "Operation Noodle Brain is working," Einstein whispered. "Phase 2, Bohr added. Raccoon deployment." They didn't actually have raccoons. They just said things like that to make themselves feel powerful. But it didn't matter, because that evening, Velma made a mistake. She blinked. And in that blink, Einstein slipped into her lab, wearing a wig, dressed as Harold. He approached the jetpack. The cat hissed. Einstein hissed back. He grabbed the pack, wheeled it toward the door, and was stopped. Velma stood there, blocking the exit, holding a spoon. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Einstein sighed. "You used to interrogate cats, Velma." "They talked," she said. "Why stop us? You're dangerous. We're ancient. You're dreaming." Einstein stepped forward. "Exactly." She hesitated. He walked past her. She didn't move. Back in the courtyard, the team cheered. Einstein returned, the jetpack slung across his back. Velma never tried to stop him again. Because even a woman with X-ray eyes and a CIA past knew one thing better than anyone. There is nothing more dangerous than an old man with a dream. Some operations require stealth, some require speed, and some require pickles. It was the day after Velma confiscated the jetpack and made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that any further attempts at escape would result in pudding privilege revocation. That hit hard. No one at Sunset Pines messed with pudding privileges. That was sacred. But Einstein wasn't ready to give up. Not after floating. Not after tasting sky dust and knocking the sacred bingo board into another dimension. Not after Bohr recited raccoon poetry under the influence of prune-fueled jet fumes. No, the dream was still alive. The jetpack had been taken, yes. It now sat inside Velma's locked, restricted storage room, right beside the emergency oxygen tanks, the suspiciously humming clipboard, and a taxidermy possum named Leonard that may or may not have been bugged by the FBI. Retrieving the jetpack directly was impossible. Velma guarded that room like a mother grizzly guarding classified government cheese. The key never left her necklace. The cameras never blinked. The door was reinforced. Rumors said the code to enter the room had been written in forgotten cuneiform and only decrypted once a week by someone named Phil. But Einstein had a plan, and that plan involved cucumbers. Lots of cucumbers. Pickled, hardened, sculpted. Enter Operation Pickle Swap. It began, as all great plans do, with an empty jam jar and a scribbled note passed under the breakfast table. "Meet me in the greenhouse at 2 a.m. Bring vinegar." No questions. Bohr arrived first, wearing gloves, a face shield, and what appeared to be a lab coat covered in mathematical graffiti and sandwich crumbs. Gertrude arrived next, dragging behind her a cart full of cucumbers. Fresh, crisp, ominously shiny. Einstein stood in the middle of the greenhouse surrounded by tools, wires, zip ties, and several oddly shaped molds labeled left thruster and denture cooling ring. "I hope you all like pickles," he said, "because we're about to build history's first edible decoy jetpack." Bohr squinted. "Won't the weight be off?" "That's why we use old batteries inside the brine core. Perfect ballast. Also, we paint the outside with metallic nail polish. I stole it from Mabel. She thinks she left it in 1964. Gertrude crossed her arms. "And the smell? Masked with lavender foot powder. It's the same trick used to smuggle kielbasa into the Louvre." No one questioned him. They began construction. For 3 nights straight, they pickled and packed, trimmed and taped. They carved gherkins into gears. They glued bread and butter slices along the stabilizer grid. They crafted a fuel tank from a hollowed-out jar of kosher dills and balanced it perfectly on top of a compressed sausage roll that had been aging in Harold's drawer since the Clinton administration. Einstein worked with manic precision. Bohr applied the final layer of nail polish with the focus of a man who once painted a scale model of the Large Hadron Collider on a fingernail. Gertrude fashioned the ignition switch from a preserved carrot, an old button, and 3 tic-tacs. By the 4th night, it was ready. Standing in the glow of moonlight, the pickle pack looked disturbingly real. Same shape, same size. Even the glowing tomato had been faked using a jar of strawberry jelly and a blinking keychain. They stored it in the freezer to harden. Now came the hard part, the swap. The plan was elegant. At 3:13 a.m., Velma would be on her nightly perimeter walk, the only time she left the storage room unattended for more than 3 minutes. Newton the parrot would trigger the alarm in the East Wing by yelling carbon monoxide into the smoke detector. Bohr would fake a medical emergency in room 14 by pretending to swallow an entire bingo marker. Gertrude would distract Velma at the stairwell by arguing about pudding expiration policies. Meanwhile, Einstein would sneak into the storage room, replace the real jetpack with the pickle pack, and leave before the alarm reset. They rehearsed again. Bohr perfected his marker-swallowing gag using a marshmallow and dramatic facial expressions. Newton practiced shouting various emergency phrases into the intercom, including fire, suspicious gas, and I'm a toaster. Finally, the night came. At 3:13 a.m., the lights flickered. Newton screamed. Velma's walkie-talkie crackled. Bohr screamed louder. Velma ran. Gertrude yelled, "That pudding expired in 2007. Einstein was in. He picked the lock with a bobby pin and a toothpick dipped in prune syrup. He slid into the room. There was the real jetpack. Glorious. Dented. Heroic. Smelling faintly of soup and rebellion. He placed the pickle pack down carefully in its place, adjusted the straps, sprinkled a bit of dust on it for realism, and wheeled the real one out under a blanket labeled, "Laundry, do not touch." By the time Velma returned, Einstein was back in his bed pretending to snore. Everything had gone perfectly. Until the next morning. Einstein was sipping weak tea and trying to read the crossword puzzle upside down when the announcement came over the intercom. "Attention residents," Velma's voice boomed, calm and cold. "There will be no pudding today. A crime has been committed." A hush fell across Sunset Pines. But someone has tampered with the restricted storage room. Bohr dropped his spoon. Gertrude spit out her tea. Newton fainted. Velma entered the dining hall holding a soggy jetpack. It was dripping brine, pickle juice, lavender nail polish. Einstein stood. "What is the meaning of this?" Velma narrowed her eyes. "Explain to me," she said, holding up the jetpack, "why this flight machine appears to be made of fermented vegetables." Gasps echoed. Mabel whispered, "He's weaponized snacks." Velma stepped closer. "You thought you could fool me with a sculpture of brined betrayal?" Einstein raised his chin. "I thought you'd appreciate the artistry." "I interrogated Nixon's cat," she hissed. "Do you really think pickles can stop me?" He smiled. "No. But it delayed you, didn't it?" Behind her, a window opened. Gertrude tossed down a rope. Bohr appeared with a cart carrying the real jetpack, already humming, already warm. Velma turned too late. Einstein ran. Bohr triggered the music, Ride of the Valkyries with dubstep. Einstein leapt onto the jetpack. Velma lunged. Gertrude yelled, "For putting in glory!" The jetpack roared. Einstein lifted off. Feet in the air, hair blazing, the smell of pickles wafting through the dining hall. And in that moment, every elderly heart in Sunset Pines beat just a little faster. He flew. Out the window. Across the koi pond. Through the clouds of early morning mist. Above the bingo ruins. Velma stood, wind in her face, holding the leaking pickle pack. She didn't smile. But she didn't stop him either. Because even someone with X-ray eyes and CIA credentials has to admire a man who can build hope out of cucumbers. Sunrise came slowly over Sunset Pines, sliding across the grass like a secret. The birds weren't quite singing yet. The koi weren't quite awake. But the sky was beginning to blush, the kind of color that made you think something important might happen. Something rare. Something that hadn't happened in a very long time. On the third floor, just past room 21B where Harold claimed the walls were whispering again, a single wheelchair creaked its way toward the stairwell door. Albert Einstein, slightly hunched, slightly wheezing, and slightly on fire with rebellion, wheeled himself forward with the determination of a man who had once rearranged the universe's math and now needed to rearrange his own destiny. Underneath a frayed checkered blanket, draped lazily across his lap, sat the real jetpack. Not the decoy made of pickles that now lived in Velma's shame closet. Not the prototype that had flung him into soup, but the one. The flight-ready, prune-fueled, denture-regulated, Bohr-enhanced miracle of old man engineering. Einstein looked both ways before pushing open the door to the stairwell. There were cameras, sure, but he'd angled the hallway mirror just enough to block them. And Bohr had left a decoy of Einstein sitting in a wheelchair down the hall made entirely of throw pillows and yarn hair. From a distance, or with one eye squinted, it was basically identical. He took the elevator. Of course he did. His knees weren't built for stairs anymore. But the stairwell door made him feel heroic. Meanwhile, on the roof, Niels Bohr was already waiting. He stood by the eastern ledge, cassette player in hand, wrapped in a long trench coat he swore was theatrical necessity. The cassette player was an antique, one of the few things he hadn't modified to double as a blender. This one was pure, sacred, devoted to one song and one song only. He held the player over his head like a priest with a relic, pressed play, and the opening swell of Ride of the Valkyries cracked through the cold morning air like thunder wrapped in violins. Einstein appeared a moment later, blanket flapping, wheels squeaking. Bohr grinned. "You look illegal." Einstein nodded. "It's the rage. It keeps me youthful." He rolled to the center of the rooftop. The sun now hovered just over the treetops, spilling gold across the old shingles and illuminating the lines of Einstein's face like scripture. His eyes, tired but alive, flicked upward. "We're really doing this," he said. Bohr wheeled closer. "We've outlived most of our enemies, Albert, and all of our excuses. Is Gertrude in place?" "She's in the courtyard with the coded signal flags. She said if you get more than 20 feet off the ground, she'll consider marrying you." Einstein smirked. "That's motivation." Bohr patted the jetpack gently. Fuels loaded. Prunes, cola, and residual rage from watching Velma reorganize the puzzle drawer. "Good. Stabilizers aligned. Denture ring pressurized. Perfect. And if you burst into flames midair?" Einstein shrugged. "I'll consider it a warm send-off." He stood. Slowly, painfully, gloriously. He shrugged off the blanket and revealed the machine. It shimmered. It hummed. It looked like a blender had fallen in love with a warship and they'd both gone to a retirement home to raise a genius child. Bohr offered his hand. "Are you ready to break the sky?" Einstein shook it. "I've been ready since the pudding exploded." With Bohr's help, he strapped into the harness, tightened the buckles, checked the monitor. The dials read full. The tomato glow fuel gauge blinked green. The jetpack's thrusters twitched like animals waiting to be unleashed. Einstein looked down at the courtyard. The other residents were beginning to stir. Gertrude stood near the fountain, holding up 2 red flags and wearing a shirt that read, "I saw Einstein fly and all I got was this inhaler." Harold stood beside her, muttering something about seeing the end of time. Newton sat on his shoulder, squawking -10 on a loop. A hush began to fall over the grounds. Even Velma, who had just discovered the pickle sculpture had started growing mold, paused at the nurse's station and tilted her head toward the sky. Einstein breathed in. The air tasted like grass, sun, rebellion, and foot powder. He smiled. Bohr leaned in. "Any last words?" Einstein looked at the horizon. "I spent my whole life explaining gravity," he said. "Maybe now I'll understand it." Then he pressed the button. The jetpack ignited. A roar, deep and ancient, rattled through the shingles. Forks vibrated. Dentures hummed. Steam burst from the exhaust, glowing with prune fire and atomic promise. Einstein lifted. 2 feet, then 5, then 12. He was flying. He was flying. The residents gasped. Bohr yelled something in Latin. Gertrude fainted politely. Einstein tilted forward, hands out like wings, hovering over the edge of the building. The sunrise painted him gold and orange, casting his shadow over the koi pond like a myth resurrected. Velma dropped her clipboard. "Impossible," she whispered. Harold screamed. "He's entering the astral realm." Bohr danced. Einstein twirled. The music swelled. The wind shifted. And the rooftop, after years of doing absolutely nothing exciting, became a launch pad of legends. Einstein laughed. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a bellow, a roar, a sound that peeled off years and peeled back walls and filled the sky with something electric. He soared above the trees. He skimmed the flagpole. He circled the garden. And then, gently, gracefully, he landed on the roof again. Not crashed. Landed. 2 feet flat. Steam swirling around him like a fog of glory. Bohr wheeled forward, eyes wide. Einstein took off his goggles. That, he said, was better than theoretical. The crowd below burst into applause. Some cheered. Some cried. A few threw pudding cups into the air like confetti. Even Newton sang. Velma didn't move, but her lip twitched. A little. Einstein unstrapped himself. The jetpack hissed softly, still warm, still glowing. Bohr tapped the casing. "You're going again, aren't you?" Einstein grinned. "Next time I go beyond the fence." "Where?" "Anywhere." They sat on the roof, watching the sky lighten. For the first time in years, the roof of Sunset Pines felt like a beginning. The rebellion had taken flight. Not to break rules, but to remind the world, quietly, loudly, wildly, that some fires never go out, especially the ones fueled by pickles, prunes, and the pure, stubborn hope of old men who still dream big. Einstein had flown once. Only once. But once was enough to infect him with a rare and dangerous condition known as terminal hope. The symptoms were classic: reckless ambition, delusions of flight, and a persistent grin that made Velma even more suspicious than usual. And ever since his short hover turned rooftop legend, the staff at Sunset Pines watched him the way zookeepers watch a chimp who has just discovered a screwdriver. Bohr called it flight fever. Gertrude called it midlife crisis, but late. Harold called it witchcraft and sky sorcery and refused to go outside. But Einstein called it phase 2. He was going to fly again. Properly this time. Beyond the koi pond. Past the shuffleboard court. Above the roof tiles. Farther. Faster. Higher. There was only one small, pickle-scented problem. The jetpack had begun to hum. Not in a musical, elegant way. Not even in a scientifically explainable way. It hummed the way suspicious cheese hums after 4 days on a radiator. Bohr had noticed the change first. While polishing the denture ring with a toothbrush and prune oil, he heard it, a low buzz, the sound of a blender thinking about rebellion. "Did you recalibrate the nozzle oscillators?" he asked. Einstein frowned. "I thought you recalibrated the nozzle oscillators." I was handling the propellant dampeners. I was busy painting the launch trigger red. Red inspires velocity. They stared at each other. Gertrude, knitting in the corner with a stack of rejection letters from NASA, sighed. I told you both to read the checklist. But Einstein wasn't interested in checklists anymore. He was interested in the sky. So, naturally, he ignored the warning signs. The loose screw that rolled under the radiator, the bubbling prune fuel that hissed when the lights turned off, the small trail of jelly leaking from the tomato-powered energy core. He brushed it all off as atmospheric anticipation. And so, just 3 days after the triumphant rooftop rebellion, Einstein wheeled the jetpack out into the open again. This time, he chose the east courtyard. Quiet, spacious, the ideal launch pad, and dangerously close to Mrs. Kilpatrick's bird bath. Now, Mrs. Kilpatrick was not to be trifled with. She was 94 years old, had titanium hips, and a personal weather station she'd built from popsicle sticks and war stories. Her bird bath was her pride. It was enormous, a grand porcelain monstrosity shaped like a Roman fountain, complete with cherubs and a tiny working mist feature. She called it the Avian Spa. The birds called it Heaven's Jacuzzi. Everyone else called it that thing we are never ever allowed to touch. It stood in the center of the courtyard, glimmering, glistening, gloriously inconvenient. Einstein saw it, eyed it, calculated distance. Well out of range, he muttered, unless physics becomes dramatic. Bohr handed him the goggles. Good luck. Gertrude tossed him a prune bar. For the journey. Newton, perched on Bohr's shoulder, yelled, "Clear for liftoff," and then sneezed into Bohr's ear. Einstein strapped in. The sky was blue. The grass, green. The air, charged. He pressed the button. The jetpack flared to life. Forks vibrated. Dentures clinked. The glowing tomato pulsed with barely contained citrus rage. Einstein rose. 3 feet. And then the hum returned. But now it was louder. It was no longer a hum. It was a growl. Then a gurgle. Then a horrifying squeal, like a vacuum cleaner possessed by the spirit of a chainsaw. Einstein looked down. Bohr was frantically waving a wrench. Gertrude was screaming, "Abort! Abort!" Einstein grinned. And then everything happened at once. The jetpack twisted. Not right, not left, not even upside down. It twisted in a way geometry had not prepared for. The forks spun backward. The dentures began whistling. The tomato glowed brighter than ever before, then flashed. And Einstein rocketed forward. Not up, not out, forward, straight toward the avian spa. Bohr shouted, "No!" Gertrude dropped her knitting. Mrs. Kilpatrick gasped from her patio, clutching a cup of chamomile tea and 3 parakeets. Einstein, mid-air, attempted to steer. He yanked the handle. He twisted the knob. He kicked a lever marked, "Don't ever touch." Nothing worked. The jetpack screeched like a caffeinated accordion and zeroed in on its porcelain target with precision only irony could achieve. Einstein crashed into the bird bath. It wasn't a splash. It was a biblical event. Water flew. Bird screamed. The mist feature exploded in a dramatic steam cloud. One cherub's head popped off and bounced gently onto Bohr's foot. Silence. Then the parrot yelled, "We have impact." Einstein sat in the ruins of the avian spa, drenched, blinking, holding a very angry pigeon in his lap. Mrs. Kilpatrick stood above him. She did not blink. "Dr. Einstein," she said, voice ice cold, "you have desecrated paradise." "I regret nothing," he replied. "Except physics? No, especially physics." The jetpack hissed. It sizzled. Then it coughed. A final plume of steam shot from its left vent and knocked over a flamingo lawn ornament. Bohr and Gertrude rushed forward. Bohr examined the wreckage. Power core melted. Stabilizers bent. Denture ring is now a necklace. Einstein coughed. "Tell me the truth. Did I fly?" Bohr nodded solemnly. "You soared. Into doom. But you soared." Gertrude helped him up. "Come on, Bert. Let's get you inside before Velma shows up with a mop and a taser." But it was too late. Velma emerged from the nurse's station. Slowly, calmly, holding her clipboard like a guillotine. She surveyed the wreckage, the misting cherubs, the traumatized birds, Einstein, dripping, steaming, slightly smoking. She said nothing. She simply walked over, picked up the remaining piece of the jetpack, a fork now fused into a permanent curve, and held it like evidence in a trial. Then she leaned close and whispered, "You owe Mrs. Kilpatrick a bird bath." Einstein, soaked, shivering, and smiling, replied, "I'll build her a bird cathedral." That night, the jetpack went back underground. Bohr began repairs immediately, muttering to himself in equations and poetry. Gertrude drew up blueprints for an avian reconstruction project involving bubbles and classical music. Einstein sat wrapped in 3 blankets, sipping hot tea, staring at the stars through the lab's cracked ceiling. It hadn't been a perfect flight. It hadn't even been a controlled one. But it had been unforgettable. Because sometimes the dream doesn't have to take you far. Sometimes it just has to remind you that you're not done yet. That tomorrow, even if it's in a bird bath, you'll try again. After the bird bath incident, the staff at Sunset Pines implemented several new rules. 1. No flight attempts before breakfast. 2. No propulsion devices near aquatic garden decor. 3. No experimental pickle-based aeronautics in shared recreational spaces. And most importantly, all residents must submit to Velma's morning eye contact check, a brief but terrifying stare designed to detect any trace of rebellion. Einstein failed the first check. So did Bohr. Gertrude passed only because she was wearing sunglasses shaped like lemons and refused to acknowledge the test was happening. The jetpack, meanwhile, was in shambles. The crash into the avian spa had shattered 2 forks, melted a third of the prune core casing, and left the denture-based cooling ring humming the theme to Murder, she wrote. The glowing tomato had stopped pulsing. It now just kind of sat there looking exhausted, like a fruit that had seen too much. Bohr tried replacing the stabilizers with parts from a broken accordion. Einstein attempted to reboot the fuel sequence using pure anger. Neither effort worked. Gertrude, watching from her rocking chair, finally tossed down her knitting and said, "Boys, move aside. I'm bringing out the tape. Not just any tape. Quantum duct tape. Forged in 1974 during a knitting accident, it had lived for decades in a secret compartment of Gertrude's sewing kit, hidden beneath a false bottom thimble and guarded by a diagram of Richard Nixon doing yoga. No one quite understood the properties of the tape. It was invisible, unreliable, occasionally sentient. If applied to one side of a surface, it would occasionally appear on the other. Sometimes it fixed things. Sometimes it caused philosophical crises. Einstein once theorized it operated across multiple timelines, healing a crack in one universe while simultaneously creating a disco party in another. Bohr once tried to use it to fix a toaster. The toaster now recited limericks. But desperate times called for quantum solutions. So the 3 of them gathered in the underground lab. Einstein covered in ointment from his recent crash, Bohr chewing on a licorice stick shaped like Schrödinger, and Gertrude wielding a roll of tape no one could see but everyone could hear humming. "Step back," Gertrude said, cracking her knuckles. "Mama's gonna patch the sky." Einstein held up a fractured thruster. "Apply to the edge?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Apply to your hopes. This tape doesn't stick to metal. It sticks to belief." Bohr looked skeptical. "That's not science. It is when you're 91 and done with nonsense." She carefully reached toward the damaged stabilizer. There was a shimmer, a ripple, a slight distortion in the light. A sound like a violin string made of fog. She pressed. The crack sealed. Einstein's eyes widened. "That's actually working." Gertrude shrugged. "Sometimes it helps to believe in impossible things. Or pudding without lumps. Or this ridiculous flying death blender you've built." They worked together for hours. Bohr lashed a cracked exhaust valve shut using dental floss and good intentions. Einstein stabilized the prune core housing using 3 rubber bands, a spoon, and a detailed memory of his childhood fear of ducks. Gertrude continued weaving the quantum tape over stress fractures, doing her best to avoid letting it tangle with reality. At one point, she dropped it. The lights flickered, and Bohr momentarily spoke fluent Esperanto before the tape rewound itself and floated back into her hand. Once all the physical components were back in place, they faced the final challenge, the midair stabilizer. A core part of the jetpack's design, a small, round disc that kept it from spiraling like a confused bat, had been knocked loose. And unfortunately, it could only be accessed mid-flight. Bohr had mounted it under the primary lift chamber, which, in retrospect, was a design flaw based entirely on aesthetics. Einstein stared at the diagram. "If I can hover long enough," he said, "we can patch it with the last of the tape." Bohr nodded. "You'll need bungee cords and a distraction." Gertrude looked up. "I have an idea." The next morning, while Velma was giving her speech on proper pill dispensing etiquette and the dangers of rebellious soup, the entire east courtyard erupted in chaos. Gertrude, in a hot pink bathrobe, was ziplining across the koi pond while hurling expired pudding cups at strategically placed mannequins. Bohr was on the loudspeaker, blasting Beethoven's Fifth, mixed with goat sounds. Newton, the parrot, had somehow hotwired the intercom and was broadcasting Shakespearean insults to every room. And Einstein? Einstein was in the air. Not high, not far, but up, just enough. The jetpack groaned, hissed, vibrated. The prune core sputtered. The fork alignment panel clicked erratically. But it worked. Sort of. He hovered, 10 feet above the courtyard, directly above Gertrude, who now wielded a broom like a sword and shouted, "You shall not deny me extra custard." Bohr yelled, "Einstein, the stabilizer. Now." Einstein reached under the chamber, unstrapped the emergency toolkit, pulled out the last roll of quantum duct tape. He leaned forward, dangerously. The jetpack dipped. A pigeon squawked. Mrs. Kilpatrick screamed, "Not again!" Einstein wrapped the bungee cord around his waist, took a deep breath, and jumped. Midair, swinging beneath the jetpack like a confused pendulum, he flailed. "Left!" Bohr screamed. "No, right!" Gertrude corrected. Einstein spun. And in a glorious moment of pure guesswork, blind courage, and a tiny whisper of hope, he slapped the tape onto the stabilizer with his eyes closed. The buzzing stopped. The humming settled. The jetpack floated, smooth as silk. He had done it. Success! Bohr shouted. "He didn't die," Gertrude added. Einstein let out a laugh so pure, so full of fire, that for a second, even Velma stopped yelling at the pudding. He pulled himself back into the straps, engaged the landing gear, touched down in the courtyard like a bird who'd briefly forgotten how to be old. The crowd of residents, many still holding pudding weapons, burst into applause. Gertrude ran to him. Bohr rolled forward with the pride of a man who'd engineered chaos and survived it. Einstein unbuckled, removed his helmet, and said softly, "That was intense." "You flew with quantum tape and bungee cords," Gertrude said, hugging him. "You broke the laws of logic." "You danced on the edge of probability," Bohr added, "and your slippers stayed on the whole time." Einstein looked around, at the stunned staff, at the misting cherubs, miraculously repaired, at the sky, stretching out like a map no one had finished drawing. "We're not done," he whispered. Gertrude grinned. "Not even close." And deep inside the jetpack, the quantum tape shimmered, almost as if it knew. Because sometimes you don't fix things by following instructions. Sometimes you fix them by jumping into the air with nothing but hope, tape that may or may not exist, and the knowledge that dreams don't retire just because people do. It began, as all great catastrophes do, with a simple misunderstanding and a large trail of smoke. The jetpack was running better than ever. Einstein had hovered, flown, dipped, spun, barrel-rolled into a bird bath, and survived the world's first midair bungee-assisted quantum duct tape repair. But now it was time for something bolder, something bigger, something that would shake the atmosphere and leave a trail across the sky. Literally. Einstein stood at the edge of the courtyard, goggles down, knees trembling, jetpack humming with the confidence of a blender possessed by ambition. Behind him, Bohr gave a thumbs up from his wheelchair-turned-mobile command center, still wearing his trench coat and holding a clipboard with a single, dramatic checklist item: sky domination. Gertrude was already in the courtyard with binoculars and snacks. She'd made signs. One said, "Fly, fool, fly." The other just said, "Duck." Bohr had a speaker set up that played classical music backwards. Newton the parrot had been trained to yell, "Up, UOLD genius," at launch. And someone, possibly Harold, had made a little countdown timer out of a potato clock and a singing doorbell. At precisely 6:47 a.m., Einstein blasted off into the sky. The roar of the jetpack was deeper now, more sure of itself. The lift was strong. The denture cooling ring was stable. The prune-based fuel mixture had fermented to a perfect boil. He was aloft, climbing rapidly over the grounds of Sunset Pines, scattering pigeons, confusing local drones, and prompting Mrs. Kilpatrick to yell, "I told you he was going to ascend." But as Einstein ascended into the blue, he noticed something new. A knob, a very small knob, marked "Smoke Riders." He blinked. Bohr had mentioned something about this. During one of their midnight engineering sessions, somewhere between inventing prune-powered rotors and unsuccessfully debating anti-gravity pogo boots, Bohr had added a feature: a smoke-riding trail system. "For dramatic effect," he'd said, chewing on licorice and wearing socks with equations on them. Einstein hadn't paid attention at the time. Now he turned the knob, and the sky began to sizzle. Behind him, a plume of white vapor exploded like whipped cream from heaven. It began forming loops, curls, arcs. It followed the jetpack's path like a loyal dragon. Einstein smiled. This was magnificent. He looped once. The smoke looped too. He twisted sideways. The smoke swirled. And then he began to write. Or, more accurately, his jetpack did. See, Bohr had pre-programmed the smoke trail with a message. He claimed it would simply read, "Greetings from the sky." But Bohr had improvised. Because as Einstein soared, the letters began to appear. Not soft words, not cheerful phrases, but sharp, defiant, physics-blaspheming ones. F equals MS for amateurs. In 20-foot-tall white loops. In the middle of the morning sky. Over 3 schoolyards, 2 retirement homes, and a suspiciously large yoga retreat. Einstein didn't notice at first. He was too busy shouting with joy. But on the ground, chaos had already begun. A teenage girl doing TikTok dances in her backyard screamed and flipped her camera toward the sky. A professor sipping coffee at the university physics building spit espresso across his telescope. A retired engineer mowed his lawn in slow horror, muttering, "No, no, that's Newton's baby." By the time Einstein banked around for a victory loop, the internet had exploded. The smoke still hung in the sky, bold and curly and wildly disrespectful. Within 15 minutes, #EinsteinRoastNewton was trending globally. A Harvard physicist fainted live on a panel about classical mechanics. A retired rocket scientist challenged the smoke to a duel. And Bohr's SoundCloud remix titled, "Inertia is a Social Construct," hit 11,000 streams. Back at Sunset Pines, Velma dropped her clipboard. She stormed into the courtyard, lips tight, eyes locked on Bohr. "What did he write?" Bohr, calm as ever, adjusted his coat and said, "Nothing untrue." "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed. "Yes," he replied. "We've disrupted the known universe with punctuation." Gertrude was beside herself with glee. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "like graffiti on a textbook." Meanwhile, Einstein finally caught on. He hovered midair, twisted, looked behind him, and saw the message curling in the sky. His mouth dropped. Then he burst out laughing. Loud, undignified, joy-fueled laughter. He swooped lower. Bohr yelled, "You're welcome." Einstein hovered above the courtyard, shouting, "I did not authorize that message, but I fully support it." Students were filming. Cars were pulling over. An airline flying overhead radioed their base to report some sort of floating protest sign being towed by an old man with bad posture. Einstein circled once more, waved to Mrs. Kilpatrick, who shook a feather duster at him, and then began his descent. He landed in the koi pond. Gertrude sprinted over, trying not to laugh. Bohr arrived with a towel and a monocle. Einstein emerged, soaked, sputtering, beaming. "You owe the world's physicists an apology," Gertrude said. "No," he replied, "they owe me a thank you for waking them up." Bohr nodded solemnly. Newton had it coming. Velma arrived with a megaphone and a mop. "Albert," she said, voice stern, "you've started a theoretical war." "I've started a conversation," he replied. "The world needs wonder and sarcasm, especially sky sarcasm." She narrowed her eyes. "The physics department at MIT is calling you a heretic." "Then I'm finally famous again." Gertrude handed him a dry pair of socks. "You'll be in textbooks for this." Or added, "or on bathroom walls." Einstein looked toward the sky. The smoke had begun to fade now, drifting into wispy memory. But the message had done its job. Students were asking questions. Professors were rewriting lectures. TikTok was ablaze with remixes of F=MA is for amateurs set to see shanties, trap beats, and interpretive dance. And somewhere, across the quiet hush of morning, the world had remembered something it had almost forgotten. That science doesn't have to be sacred. It can be loud. It can be messy. It can be hilarious. And sometimes, it can be written across the sky by an 83-year-old man with a jetpack made of forks, prunes, and unapologetic genius. When a man writes F=MA is for amateurs in the sky, the world notices. But when that man crash lands in a koi pond and shakes prune juice off his beard like a triumphant space duck, Sunset Pines Retirement Facility goes into high alert. Einstein didn't intend to start a chase. He really didn't. In fact, his plan for the day was to eat cottage cheese, maybe play one passive-aggressive game of chess with Gertrude, and continue redesigning the pickle stabilizer on his jetpack using parts of a broken clarinet. But fate had a different plan. More specifically, Velma had a different plan. The message in the sky had gone viral. Students outside MIT were holding signs that read, "Mass is overrated." A college professor threw his Newtonian mechanics textbook into a fountain. A small group of flat earthers misunderstood the message entirely and declared Einstein their new messiah. Velma was furious. No more clipboard lectures. No more stern warnings. No more confiscating jetpacks and quietly hiding them behind the janitor's mop bucket. This time, she was coming for him. With backup, she sounded the code 20. Gerontological offensive, non-escapable. That's right, the staff were suiting up. Out came the scooters, the powered wheelchairs, the emergency segways. There was even an electric golf cart with Wrath of Velma written in glitter glue on the side. They formed a loose battalion in the parking lot. Nurses, orderlies, and one suspiciously agile man from accounting with rollerblades strapped to his Crocs. Meanwhile, Einstein was already back in the sky. He had taken off again after breakfast, half out of joy, half because Gertrude had challenged him to write =meow superscript 2 above the nearby cat shelter. He had no idea that behind him, Velma was mobilizing an army of charging scooters like a geriatric cavalry. At exactly 11:04 a.m., the retirement home grounds erupted into full chase mode. Einstein zipped across the sky like a sugar-fueled hummingbird. Below him, the slowest, strangest pursuit in recorded history. Velma led the charge, teeth clenched, wind flapping her name tag. "After him," she barked as her golf cart jerked forward with the grace of a shopping cart full of bricks. Nurse Barb rode a hoverboard meant for her grandson. She wobbled like a confused penguin but screamed battle cries in Latin. 3 other staff members flanked her on electric wheelchairs, each equipped with rolled-up yoga mats as lances. Einstein turned, and he saw them. The scooters, the Fury, the glitter-glued golf cart. He should have been afraid. He laughed instead. "Very well," he said to the wind. "Let's dance." He banked left, zoomed past the koi pond, and did a loop just to flex. The staff swerved and screamed. Bohr, watching from a folding chair beside Gertrude, sipped his tea and muttered, "I told them not to challenge a man who once reinvented gravity to reach a cookie jar." Gertrude, beside him, yelled into a walkie-talkie, Albert, they're closing in. It's time. Time for what? Einstein's voice crackled through the static. Time for the prune juice bombs. Einstein reached into his vest. Strapped to his sides were 6 small glass bottles of pure prune extract, brewed in Gertrude's lab beneath the koi pond, now weaponized and fitted with drop-release clothespins. He'd never tested them, until now. He soared higher. The staff pursued, scooters whining, Velma barking orders. Einstein reached altitude. "Bombing run," he shouted, and let the first bottle fly. The glass shattered on the pavement, splattering the road in a syrupy brown mess. Velma's cart swerved. Nurse Barb hit a prune slick and spun 3 times before colliding gently with the garden gnome by the hedges. The rest of the scooters braked too late, and 3 powered wheelchairs collided like bumper cars in slow motion. One of them shouted, "I regret nothing." Einstein wheeled back around and dropped a second bottle, this one infused with fiber and rage. The sidewalk erupted in shrieks and awkward skidding. From above, Einstein looked down and muttered, "Tactical fruit science at its finest." But Velma wasn't done. She activated the rumble function. No one knew the golf cart had a turbo setting. Least of all the golf cart. It bucked like an angry sheep, jerked forward, and shot down the path with a scream that may have come from the engine or Velma herself. She was gaining fast. Einstein banked around the pool house. She turned tighter. He climbed. She accelerated. Bohr, watching the whole thing unfold like an Olympic sport for the unhinged elderly, shook his head. This is the finest moment in physics history. Gertrude turned her binoculars to the chaos. "We need to stall her." Bohr reached into his satchel and pulled out a whoopee cushion, a rubber chicken, and an old ham radio. Gertrude blinked. "You're going to fight Velma with slapstick and nostalgia?" Bohr grinned. "We're scientists. Improvisation is our only law." Einstein dropped another prune bomb. Velma avoided it. She skidded around the tennis court and screamed, "You're grounded for eternity." Einstein dipped low. She chased. The chase twisted through the back courtyard, around the gazebo, over the footbridge that hadn't been foot-safe since 1987, and past a statue of Benjamin Franklin holding an umbrella and wearing sunglasses someone glued on in 2004. Einstein was running out of prune juice. He tossed the last bottle, laced with sparkling water and a cinnamon stick, and watched it crash in front of Velma's wheels. She jumped it, in the golf cart. With a spin, Einstein's jaw dropped. "She's evolving," he muttered. Bohr radioed in. "You need to lose her. Now." Einstein angled for the main garden, but Velma cut him off. He turned for the parking lot, blocked by Nurse Barb, now rebalanced and dual-wielding stress balls like nunchucks. Einstein climbed. She followed. Not physically, but with willpower and sheer yelling volume. The rest of the staff were regrouping, circling the main building like siege warriors waiting for the airship to descend. Einstein rose higher, into the sky, out of prune juice, out of tricks, and then he remembered something. Gertrude's glowing tomato. It wasn't just glowing for dramatic effect. It was radioactive. Bohr's idea. "If everything fails," he'd said, "drop the tomato. Even physics will stop to watch." Einstein reached into his pocket. The tomato hummed softly, and dropped it. No explosion, just a slow, spinning fall, and then it bounced. Twice, right into Velma's golf cart. It wedged under the pedal and emitted a soft, beautiful hum, like an alien kazoo played by angels. Velma blinked. The golf cart blinked. Then the entire cart lit up in disco colors, made a soft whoop-whoop noise, and shut down completely. Silence. Einstein hovered above the battlefield. Below, staff groaned, wheelchairs reversed, yoga mat lances fell to the side. Velma sat in the dead golf cart, blinking at the radioactive tomato, which now played a lullaby through the cup holder. Einstein slowly descended. He landed on the roof of the recreation center. Gertrude climbed the ladder to meet him. Bohr wheeled up with a boombox that played Ride of the Valkyries on kazoo. Einstein looked at the sky. Clear again. And finally quiet. "I believe," he said, "that counts as a victory." Gertrude nodded. "You flew. You fought. You bombed them with fiber, Bohr added, and you survived Velma's turbo cart of fury. Einstein breathed deep. Somewhere in the background, the staff began to rise, shake themselves off, and question their life choices. And Einstein? Einstein looked over the edge of the roof and grinned. Let the physics world tremble, he said, because the old man still flies. He was a blur against the morning sky, a streak of defiance wrapped in wool socks and prune vapor, with only one goal now: freedom. Albert Einstein, aged 83, beard like a thundercloud, goggles fogged with altitude, soared across suburban rooftops with the determination of a man who knew he was running on borrowed physics. His prune-fueled jetpack wheezed behind him like a tired accordion. The last drops of juice had been squeezed. The exhaust trailed thin and weak. Altitude was falling. Gravity was circling. And yet Einstein laughed. Below him, the town was waking up. Teenagers filmed him from rooftops. Dogs barked at the sky. A confused traffic warden wrote a ticket to a lamppost for looking suspicious. And in the distance, the golden arch of the Taco Bell logo gleamed like a lighthouse of questionable nutrition. It called to him, not with science, not with equations, but with hunger. The jetpack coughed. Einstein cursed. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a crumpled Werther's Original, popped it in his mouth, and muttered, "If this is how I go, let it be crunchy." And then he began his descent. Not smooth, not steady. He spiraled. A feathered wobble through clouds of pigeons. A brief bounce off a billboard that read, "Try the new spicy Diablo burrito," which, in hindsight, was foreshadowing. And then, right into the middle of a Taco Bell drive-thru. The sound was something between a dumpster thud and a sad tuba. He landed squarely between a silver Prius and a suspiciously loud motorcycle. Plastic trays flew. Nacho cheese packets burst like confetti. A seagull watching from the roof dropped its taco in shock. Einstein sat up, dazed but grinning. The jetpack hissed one last breath, then went silent. Smoke curled lazily around him. The drive-through speaker crackled. A voice asked, "Would you like to try our new spicy Einstein Crunch Wrap?" There was a pause. Then the driver of the Prius, a young man wearing a hoodie that said, "Bite me, I'm quantum," stuck his head out the window and gasped, "Dude, it's Einstein. Like, the meme guy." Einstein blinked. More cars lined up behind him. A soccer mom in a minivan gasped. A teenager took 17 selfies before she even got out of her car. People thought it was a PR stunt. A genius-level Taco Bell promotion. An elderly legend, flying in with spice and science to bless their burrito orders. Einstein, still sitting in a daze among shredded lettuce and crushed napkins, suddenly found a taco being handed to him. He took it, with reverence, and then he ate. "Oh my quantum gods," the hoodie kid whispered. "He's endorsing it. He's actually eating a burrito." Einstein stood slowly, taco in one hand, broken jetpack on his back, looking like a war veteran of flavor and combustion. His beard was singed on one side. His eyebrows were raised in eternal judgment, and his socks were mismatched. "I require Diablo sauce," he announced. Someone fainted. A girl screamed, "I knew spicy math was real." The drive-through employee inside was now hyperventilating and Googling how to handle a celebrity physicist crash landing on property. Einstein took another bite. It burned slightly. He approved. "This," he declared, "is thermodynamics I can respect." Cars behind honked impatiently. Einstein ignored them. He climbed onto the ordering pedestal and addressed the crowd. "Citizens, I come in peace and salsa. I am not your marketing campaign. I am your warning." He raised the taco like a torch. Science cannot be contained within textbooks, or retirement homes, or even airspace laws. It lives here, he pointed at the burrito, and here, he pointed at his chest, and occasionally here. He pointed at his lower back, where the jetpack had left a mild scorch mark. The crowd cheered. A woman offered him her Baja Blast. He accepted. Blink. "Is this minty battery fluid?" he asked. "Yes," the teenager said, nodding furiously, "with ice." Einstein smiled. Delightfully confusing. By now, management had arrived. A man in a wrinkled Taco Bell tie and haunted eyes stepped out of the building, saw Einstein surrounded by worshippers, tacos, and two dogs wearing goggles, and immediately decided not to ask questions. Instead, he handed Einstein a coupon booklet and said, "Please don't sue us." Einstein nodded solemnly. "I would never sue a sanctuary." And then, the news crews arrived. Reporters jumped out of vans like caffeinated meerkats. Microphones extended. Cameras clicked. Someone yelled, "What does this mean for physics?" Einstein held up a bean burrito like a philosopher unveiling truth. "It means," he said, "that sometimes propulsion is less important than direction. And sometimes direction is flavor." A collective gasp. Someone cried. Bohr, watching from the live feedback at Sunset Pines, spit prune juice all over the nurse's station. Gertrude wheeled in beside him and whispered, "He's gone rogue." "No," Bohr whispered back. "He's gone legendary." Back at the Taco Bell, Einstein had begun signing sauce packets. "Keep spinning, Albert. Stay crunchy. The entropy is delicious." He refused cash, but he did accept extra napkins. One small child approached him nervously. "Mr. Einstein, sir? Is it true you made a black hole in a teacup once?" Einstein paused. It was a thermos, and it only lasted 11 seconds. "But yes." The boy saluted. Einstein returned it with a soft taco. Just then, a low whine. The sound of wheels. Velma. The golf cart had returned. Smoke puffed from the sides. Glitter from earlier still clung to the front. And Velma's eyes were locked on target like a heat-seeking librarian. Einstein stiffened. The crowd noticed. "Is that the taco police?" "No," Einstein muttered. "That is wrath on wheels." Velma rolled up slowly. "Stopped, sir." Einstein stood on the pedestal, tattered, greasy, glorious. Velma stepped out of the cart, walked through the stunned crowd, and pointed to the scorched jetpack. "You're in violation of Facility Code 9B, unauthorized aeronautical burrito interference." Einstein raised a brow. "Are you going to arrest me with a chio?" She said nothing. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her own taco. Einstein blinked. She took a bite. Then, slowly, without breaking eye contact, said, "One day I'll catch you, but not today." She turned, walked away. The crowd lost it. Is this a movie? Who is writing this? Einstein sat back down on a bench near the condiments, opened another taco, and whispered, "Reality is just a suggestion." The sun dipped slightly. Einstein wiped his hands. The jetpack coughed again. He looked at it, at the sky, at the crowd still filming, still screaming, still worshipping. And then he stood, strapped it back on. It sparked. It rattled. It wheezed. "Old friend," he said, "we fly one more time." The crowd gasped. The managers ducked. Velma turned in disbelief, and Einstein took off, slowly, clumsily, covered in salsa. Rising above the drive-thru, bean crumbs trailing behind like stars. And from somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "That was the best Taco Tuesday of my life." By the time Einstein's jetpack gave its final wheeze, he was far beyond the suburbs, the Taco Bell, and the reach of Velma's glitter cannon golf cart. He soared past the last gas station, past the hollow echoes of billboards advertising toothpaste with questionable science, and out into the vast whispering desert. Below, the land looked like fried parchment, cracked, sunburnt, and refusing to explain itself. No roads, no towns, just shimmering heat and the occasional lizard who looked like he'd seen too much. And then, like a mirage crafted by caffeine and nostalgia, it appeared, a humble RV park circled by dusty solar panels, satellite dishes, and the faint smell of lavender incense. At its center, a wind chime made of old test tubes danced in the breeze, clinking in code. Einstein crash-landed softly into a sand dune beside a cactus wearing sunglasses. He groaned, rolled over, and then he saw it. A neon sign, flickering with retirement rage, read, "Gray Matter Estates, a place for minds that can't sit still. Einstein squinted. Could it be? The whispers, the rumors from Gertrude's conspiracy wall were true? He stumbled forward, dragging the battered jetpack behind him, when a figure in a tie-dyed lab coat stepped out of an airstream and squinted at him through bifocals made of quartz crystals. "Out?" the voice asked. Einstein blinked. Marie! Marie Curie, ageless and glowing, possibly literally, stepped into the sun with a tray of ethically sourced moon water and sage. "I told them you'd make it," she said, handing him a cup. "Did the prune fuel hold up?" "Until the Taco Bell incident," he replied. "But that's another story." She laughed. "They always are." Before he could say more, a harmonica version of Beethoven's Fifth blared from a nearby trailer, followed by the unmistakable sound of a blender having an existential crisis. Out from a teal food truck labeled Tesla's Quantum Smoothies came a man in a Hawaiian shirt and lightning bolt sandals. "Einstein!" Nikola Tesla shouted, arms wide. "You magnificent, reckless muffin." They embraced like long-lost cousins at a family reunion held on another dimension. "You still turning fruit into lightning?" Einstein asked. Tesla winked. "Only on Thursdays. Come, let me make you my new special, the positronic papaya." Before they could finish hugging, a group gathered near a shaded yoga platform where Darwin, barefoot, tan, and alarmingly flexible, was leading a class of former Nobel laureates through Downward Dog. "And remember," Darwin called out, stretching like a content flamingo, "it's not the strongest who survive, it's the ones who can hold plank during a sandstorm." Einstein's eyes filled with something dangerously close to tears. These were the minds who once challenged reality. Now they did Tai Chi before lunch and microdosed on cactus tea for clarity. He sipped his moon water and whispered, "This is heaven with bad air conditioning." Marie walked him toward a central picnic table surrounded by solar-charged lava lamps and old notebooks used as coasters. "It started with Schrödinger," she explained. "He faked a cat allergy and disappeared into the Mojave. Then Darwin wandered in, claiming he'd followed a butterfly to enlightenment. Tesla just never left. And you?" Marie smiled. "I opened a crystal shop because I wanted to see how much nonsense people would buy from a Nobel Prize winner. Spoiler, it's a lot." Einstein chuckled. From a nearby bench, a grumpy Isaac Newton adjusted his straw hat. "You're blocking my light," he grunted. "Still bitter about apples?" Einstein called. Newton sniffed. "You make one gravitational discovery, and suddenly you're a fruit guy forever." The reunion had officially begun. That night, they gathered around a bonfire fueled by organic driftwood and theoretical matter. Bohr arrived late on a Segway powered by existential dread. He brought prune chips. Sagan floated in via helium balloon chair. Even Pythagoras showed up briefly to sell triangle-themed bracelets before retreating back into mathematical silence. They sat in a circle, each with a paper plate of Tesla's gluten-free quantum nachos, swapping tales of explosions, discoveries, and various run-ins with skeptical librarians. Einstein told them about sunset pines, about Velma, about the pudding rebellion, the birdbath crash, and the time Bohr accidentally hacked the senior center's Wi-Fi to stream ancient Norse techno. They roared with laughter. "Do you remember," Tesla said, "when we tried to microwave gravity?" "That was you," Curie corrected, "and you lost both eyebrows for a month." "Worth it," he shrugged. As the stars above blinked with cosmic curiosity, Einstein leaned back, stomach full, beard windswept, heart loud. He looked around, at the greatest minds the world had forgotten, living in peace among solar ovens and questionable smoothies, still dreaming, still arguing, still alive in the ways that mattered. Darwin cleared his throat. Well, the world thinks we're gone." Einstein nodded. "Maybe we are. But maybe," Marie added, stirring her lavender lemonade with a Geiger counter, "maybe we're just waiting for the world to catch up." Tesla raised his cup. "To old thinkers. And new tacos." They cheered. In that desert haven of brains and burritos, Einstein realized something more powerful than any theory he'd ever scribbled. He wasn't running from the retirement home. He was running toward this, toward thinkers who refused to rust, toward friends who made quantum jokes during bingo, toward joy. And as the bonfire flickered, casting shadows shaped like formulas and folklore, Einstein pulled out a small metal object from his coat, the backup jetpack core. Gertrude had hidden it inside a hollowed-out chess piece. He showed it to the circle, and the circle, already grinning, nodded as one. Because tomorrow, oh yes, tomorrow they would build. The morning sun poured across the dusty metal shells of trailers, solar panels, and cactus pots filled with radioactive succulents that glowed faintly at night. Somewhere between the smoothie truck and the crystal shop, Einstein stood atop an overturned lawn chair with a spoon taped to his temple and a colander on his head. "Just tell me," he said, squinting at Tesla, "when the satellite is aligned." Tesla was deep inside his control panel, which was really just a refurbished microwave filled with wires, buttons from old remotes, and a dancing hula girl powered by static electricity. "Any second now," Tesla muttered. "Just don't sneeze. Last time you sneezed, we hijacked 4 weather balloons over Peru." Einstein nodded gravely. The spoon trembled slightly. They were preparing for a mission far nobler than their last, not just escape, but liberation. A message, a statement, a broadcast to the world that retirement did not mean retreat, that age could still dream, fly, and light small pudding fires when necessary. Einstein tapped the mic, a karaoke microphone plugged into a leaf blower. "Testing," he said. 1, 2, 3. Equals me. Marie Curie adjusted the camera, an old camcorder attached to a drone powered by grapes. She zoomed in, frowned, then wiped a smudge off the lens with a cloth labeled radioactive, probably. "All set," she announced. "Give the world your best beard." "Go live," Einstein commanded. Tesla flipped a switch labeled, "Definitely not world domination." The satellite dish on top of his RV began to rotate with a sound like someone grinding espresso beans and whispering conspiracy theories. A green light blinked. And just like that, they were live. The broadcast was intended to go to a private server hosted by Schrödinger in a bunker beneath Las Vegas. Instead, it went everywhere. A miswired switch, a mistranslated frequency. And suddenly Einstein's face, squinting, wild-haired, backlit by the sun and a disco ball, appeared on televisions, laptops, phones, tablets, airport screens, and one very confused smart fridge. Across the world, people paused mid-scroll, mid-argument, even mid-therapy, because Albert Einstein was staring at them, with a jetpack on his back, a taco in one hand, and a glittery headband that said, "Live free or fry." "My fellow humans," he began, "you have questions, and I have salsa." People blinked. In Stockholm, a classroom stopped mid-exam. In Tokyo, traffic froze. In Ohio, a man dropped his leaf blower into a swimming pool. Einstein continued, "You were told we are gone. Did history tucked neatly into textbooks. Wrong. We are here. We have always been here, aging like fine theories and questionable cheese." In the RV park, Tesla stared at the rising viewer count. He said, "We have 3 million watching." 4.2, Darwin corrected, sipping kombucha and petting a lizard named Steve. Einstein waved the taco. "Age is not the end of invention," he said. "It's the beginning of creative rebellion. We may not remember what we had for lunch yesterday, but we remember how to change the world while making great guacamole." Across the planet, phones pinged. The algorithm twitched. Influencers were confused. Members wept with joy. Einstein stood taller. "Do not fear the wrinkle. Embrace the wrinkle. Ride it like a quantum wave. And to those who say, you're too old to fly a jetpack, I say watch this." He turned, revved the jetpack, and hovered exactly 2.3 feet off the ground. The drone zoomed in. The world gasped. In Brazil, a samba band started playing. In Finland, a polar bear clapped. In Texas, someone named their baby Algit. Einstein landed with a gentle thud. "Gravity," he said. "Still loyal. Mostly." Then came the questions. Because somehow, in some horrible twist of techno-fate, Tesla had also activated the live stream chat. and it was now streaming directly onto a big screen made from old projector sheets duct-taped to 3 flamingos. Messages flew in faster than Newton's temper. Is this real? I thought he was dead? Dude's got a taco. At Jetpack Grandpa's the hero we need. Einstein blinked at the screen. Grandpa. Bohr looked up from his knitting. It's your new username. You're trending globally. Tesla added, you're verified on 15 platforms. Even the ones I made up. Einstein squinted. How do I delete the internet? Curie patted his shoulder. You can't, but you can dance in it. And then someone, probably Darwin, though no one ever admitted it, hit the music button. Ride of the Valkyries blasted through the speakers, except it was the remix version with bongos. Einstein took a deep breath, and he danced. Not coordinated, but with a kind of chaotic joy that made millions of people watching shout things like, OMG, he vibin'. Grandpa got moves. Marry me, Einstein. It was too late to turn back now. They leaned in. The world leaned in. The camera zoomed closer. Einstein's eyes twinkled. You've watched prank videos, he said. You've watched cats scream at cucumbers. But today, you've watched truth. The chat exploded. I'm crying, why is this beautiful? This is the best live since the lizard wedding stream. I feel inspired. I follow at Jetpack Grandpa forever. Tesla called out, we just hit 10 million. Einstein nodded solemnly. Then they're ready. For what? Asked Bohr. Einstein looked skyward. For part 2. The jetpack rumbled again. He strapped it on. Marie adjusted his taco holster. Darwin did one last warm-up stretch. Newton muttered something about air resistance being a myth. And then they launched. One by one. Scientists. Legends. Icons in socks and sandals. Into the sky. All captured live by a drone powered by nostalgia and grapes. The chat went feral. They're forming a V-shape like geese. Is that aerial yoga or physics? I want to be old now. They danced in the sky. They traced formulas in the clouds with eco-friendly vapor trails. They wrote, still here, above the horizon. And Einstein, flying at the tip of their wild flock, turned back to the camera one last time. To all watching, he said, you're not too old. You're not too late. You're just in time. Then the feed cut, because Tesla spilled prune juice on the modem. Back on Earth, the world erupted. Within minutes, at Jetpack Grandpa had 50 million followers. A bakery released Relativity Rolls. A metal band dropped an album called Einstein Drops the Beat and the Taco. The UN issued a statement that read, we're not sure what happened, but we support it. Meanwhile, in the RV park, Einstein sat in a hammock made of outdated Wi-Fi routers, sipping iced herbal uncertainty. Bohr, Newton, and Darwin argued over which emojis to ban. Tesla installed a smoothie printer. And Marie? She updated the Jetpack Grandpa merch store. Einstein grinned. He was a global sensation, an accidental influencer. But more importantly, he was finally heard. They arrived in black vans. Not 1, not 2, but 7. Like the government's version of a surprise birthday party. Except instead of balloons, they brought clipboards. Instead of cake, they brought protocols. And instead of singing, they stood in a silent, uniform line that screamed, you're in trouble, Grandpa. Einstein was enjoying a smoothie, prickly pear with quantum foam when they surrounded the picnic table at Gray Matter Estates. Albert Einstein, one of them said, tall, emotionless, wearing mirrored sunglasses that reflected only the fear of freedom, you are hereby ordered to surrender yourself to the Bureau of Advanced Containment and Compliance of Kinetic Elderly Activities. Einstein blinked slowly, then pointed at the Bureau logo on the man's jacket. That acronym spells Backy, he said. You didn't even try. We've been watching your broadcasts. Jetpack Grandpa has become a national concern. I'm an inspiration. You're a liability. I'm 83. You're airborne. The agents produced a scroll of documents. Not a folder, a scroll. Like they were knights, but allergic to fun. According to Federal Code 12 Crazy 4U, Section 9B, subsection "Oh no you didn't," the lead agent said, "You have violated at least 47 retirement regulations, 19 aviation laws, and 1 taco ordinance." Taco ordinance? Einstein asked. "You left your jetpack on while ordering a spicy chalupa." "I paid with exact change." "Doesn't matter." Einstein sipped his smoothie and smiled. "So what happens now?" The man pulled out a pen. "You either sign this compliance order and report to the nearest re-education center for elders with unexpected talents. Catchy. Or face escalation." Einstein leaned back and studied the circle of agents. Bureaucrats in body armor. Pens instead of swords. The final boss of modern life. He considered running, but the jetpack was still charging. He needed a stalling tactic. A distraction. A challenge. "Fine," he said. "I'll come quietly." The agents exhaled in bureaucratic relief. "But only," he added, "if I lose a game." The lead agent narrowed his eyes. "What kind of game?" Einstein stood, dusted off his robe, and gestured to a nearby table made entirely of old pizza boxes and Nobel Prize certificates. "A game of interdimensional chess." The agents laughed. Only one of them, a shorter woman with a clipboard that had actual flames painted on it, stopped laughing. "Sir," she said to the leader, "he's serious." "I know he's serious. He's Einstein." "He's Einstein." The leader paused. Einstein placed the board on the table. It had 12 dimensions. It hummed slightly and sometimes whispered secrets about Schrödinger's cat. The pieces were made of pocket watches, moonstone, and, somehow, one angry jelly bean that kept trying to bite people. "Rules?" the agent asked. "Simple," Einstein said. "If I win, you go. If I lose, I sign your paper, attend your seminars, and promise never to hover again." "Deal." They sat. The world, or at least the RV park, held its breath. Tesla sold popcorn. Darwin started a betting pool. Marie live-tweeted under the hashtag #CheckmateGrandpa. The game began. First move, Einstein advanced a rook made of dark matter into a wormhole. The agent countered with a pawn that whispered, "TPS reports" in Latin. Second move, Einstein deployed a knight who neighs with mathematical precision. The agent responded with a queen made of red tape and sheer spite. Tension crackled like static on an old AM radio. On move 17, the board briefly exploded into butterflies, then reassembled itself. On move 31, both players accidentally summoned a minor time loop where Bohr kept sneezing into his soup for 7 minutes straight. Einstein's mind danced. This wasn't just about freedom. It was about proving something deeper. That no matter how many laws or forms or gray-suited agents you throw at a person, if they still dream, they are dangerous. And beautifully alive. The agent was good. Methodical. Unfeeling. He played like someone who'd filed 17 complaints against a cloud for not having proper zoning. Einstein played with chaos. He sacrificed his king to resurrect a philosopher's bishop. He turned a pawn into Schrödinger's rook, both alive and not yet played. The agent began to sweat. The flaming clipboard lady whispered, "Sir, I think he's bending reality." "No," the agent replied. "He's reinterpreting regulations." Move 44. Einstein captured a procedural knight using a loophole shaped like a llama. Move 48. The agent called for backup. 3 more agents appeared, holding pocket constitutions and a portable fax machine. "Doesn't matter how many of you there are," Einstein said, moving his jelly bean knight into a triple check. "You can't regulate wonder." Move 52. The jelly bean knight began to sing. In German. The agents conferred, whispered, stared at the board. One of them wept softly. Then, the final move. Einstein shifted his hands slowly, deliberately, and moved his final pawn diagonally into a dimension only visible through kaleidoscopes and childhood memory. "Checkmate," he said. The board went silent, then burst into flowers. Marie clapped. Darwin fainted from excitement. Tesla shouted, Now that's how you copyright rebellion. The lead agent stood, eyes hollow, tie crooked, clipboard melting slightly. He looked around, looked at Einstein, looked at the crowd now chanting, "Jetpack, jetpack, jetpack," and he sighed, folded the compliance order in half, then quarters, then into an origami swan. "Fine," he muttered. "You win." "Of course I do," Einstein replied. "I'm old, but not done." The agent walked away. The vans vanished into the dust. The jelly bean knight bit someone's ankle. Einstein sat back down and finished his smoothie. Freedom intact, pride untouched, soul on fire. Bohr leaned over. "What would you have done if they said no to the game?" Einstein grinned. "Hidden in the cactus garden and used the decoy." "The decoy?" He pointed to a scarecrow wearing a lab coat and a fake mustache labeled, "Definitely not Einstein." Bohr nodded. "Respect." Later that night, around the bonfire, they retold the story for the 1000th time. The showdown, the bureaucrats, the jelly bean knight. Einstein smiled, looking at the stars, his old friends, always watching, always silent. Because in the end, it wasn't about escaping. It wasn't even about the jetpack. It was about refusing to shrink, to be small, to be a checkbox. It was about declaring with every wrinkle and every wobble that life, real, roaring life, doesn't end at 65 or 75 or 83. It ends only when you stop asking for more sky. And Einstein? He had just begun. Somewhere deep in the Italian countryside, where olive trees lean like curious old poets and the hills roll like lazy daydreams, there is a treehouse. But not just any treehouse. This one has hydraulic bookcases, solar-powered espresso machines, and a rooftop observatory shaped like a Fibonacci spiral. It hums slightly at night. It is, in every possible way, too glorious for taxes to understand. And inside, sipping honey-swirled tea in a porcelain mug labeled, "Still smarter than you," lives Einstein. 83. Retired. Mostly. The treehouse was designed and built by none other than Leonardo da Vinci, a kinetic sculptor and the great-great-grandniece of Leonardo da Vinci. She wears goggles even when not welding, speaks in blueprints, and once rejected an architecture award because it didn't hover. Einstein met her after the bureaucracy incident, somewhere between his viral skywriting scandal and that minor interdimensional chess tournament in Paraguay. She found him wandering the Alps muttering about probability curves and plum yogurt. "You need roots," she told him, "and maybe a better place to land." He expected a hut. She built a marvel. The foundation was a 1,000-year-old oak tree that bent just slightly to accommodate the project. The walls were made from reclaimed gondolas and wisdom. The railings were hand-forged from melted-down rotary phones and violin strings. And in the attic, tucked behind an old cuckoo clock that only went off at noon on Tuesdays, sat the jetpack. Still humming, still loyal, still ready. But Einstein didn't need it much anymore. Not every day, only Sundays. Because Sunday was for flight. Every other day was for squirrels. Yes, squirrels. They came first for the nuts, then the peanuts, then the leftover prune biscuits Tesla mailed in monthly. But they stayed for the math. Einstein began teaching one squirrel, a bold, twitchy fellow he named Schrödinger, how to recognize prime numbers using acorn stacks. Then others came. Soon, every morning, the branches outside his window looked like a fuzzy university. Squirrels lined up on branches, holding walnut slates and tiny twig pencils, chittering in organized chaos. Einstein lectured with a pointer made from a fallen antenna, drawing complex integrals in the air with gestures only squirrels could decode. He taught them probability using card tricks, calculus using catapults, and basic quantum physics using the motion of leaves. One squirrel, which he swore was the reincarnation of Bohr, kept challenging his logic with squeaks that suspiciously resembled sarcasm. "I've taught worse," Einstein would mutter, adjusting his monocle that didn't actually magnify anything. The local villagers were confused. At first, they thought it was a retirement hobby. Then the squirrels started solving crop rotation schedules. One even rebuilt a tractor using spoons. Soon, Einstein was holding open treehouse lectures for neighboring goats, owls, and one particularly curious fox named Luigi. It was ridiculous, and it was perfect. Every Sunday, Einstein would climb to the upper deck, strap on his jetpack, and soar. Not far, just over the valley, across the vineyards, over the bells of sleepy villages, through clouds that still remembered his formulas. He didn't need to escape anymore. He flew to feel, to remind himself he still could, to hum to the wind. The children of the valley would point and shout, "Jetpack Grandpa," as he passed, and Einstein would wave, toss them caramelized figs, and sometimes, in the middle of the air, shout equations like they were blessings. He became a myth, not the old man in the sky, but the old man who never stopped wondering. Leonarda occasionally joined him, flying in her own contraption, a winged bicycle powered by sonnets and espresso steam. They'd hover in silence sometimes, above the world, sipping from flasks, watching the horizon reintroduce itself each time. "Are you happy?" she once asked, drifting beside him. Einstein looked down at the patchwork of life below, goats chewing on research notes, squirrels inventing decimal systems, and a treehouse glowing like wisdom with a roof. "Yes," he said, "I'm exactly where I shouldn't be. And that's where all the magic happens." She nodded. "But because I built an elevator made of harp strings, and I need help testing it." Every week was strange. Every day was something between absurd and poetic. Einstein once judged a cheese competition between pigeons. Another time, he refereed a mushroom debate between two philosophers and a duck. One night, he wrote a lullaby for the moon in Morse code using flashlight blinks. And one morning, a squirrel published a theorem that made national news. The credit went to Anonymous, but Einstein knew. He always knew. One winter, a team of journalists tracked him down. They found the treehouse. They brought microphones, cameras, scripts. "Dr. Einstein, what is your message to the world?" He looked at them, then at the squirrels, then at the jetpack, then back at them. He leaned in. "Learn to fly," he whispered. "Do you mean literally?" "No, but also yes." They never understood, but the squirrels did. On his 84th birthday, the entire forest threw him a surprise party. There were acorn cakes, jetpack-shaped candles, and a choir of owls who sang in minor thirds. Darwin mailed a card that simply said, "I was wrong. Your evolution's favorite." Tesla sent a small box containing a glowing orange smoothie and a note, "Drink only after escaping gravity." Gertrude mailed blueprints for an intergalactic retirement yacht and instructions on how to power it using boredom. Marie sent a squirrel-sized Nobel medal. Even Bohr, still living in a hammock made of question marks, sent a poem written entirely in sneeze patterns. And Einstein? He gave a speech. It wasn't long, just 10 words. "The future belongs to the curious, especially the wrinkled ones." They applauded. And when the last squirrel fell asleep in a pile of string theory doodles, and the moon blinked kindly through the leaves, Einstein climbed into his hammock and sighed. Not because he was tired, but because he was full of air, full of fire, full of a life that had refused to obey anything except joy. And the treehouse, that impossible cathedral in the sky, creaked with laughter as the wind carried Einstein's voice, soft and smiling, into the stars. Retirement is for clocks. Einstein built a jetpack out of forks, flew into a birdbath, dodged government agents with prune-powered thrust, and now teaches calculus to squirrels in a Da Vinci treehouse. Still think retirement is boring? If this story made you laugh, think, cry, or question whether your grandpa is secretly building a time machine in the shed, then you're exactly the kind of curious legend we want around. Hit that subscribe button faster than Einstein skywriting F equals ma is for amateurs at 6,000 feet. We're not done. More unbelievable tales of genius gone rogue, forgotten legends, and old men causing new problems are on the way. Because at this channel, Old Men, Big Problems, we don't just rewrite history. We launch it into the stratosphere with duct tape and denture glue. Drop a comment if you trust Einstein to fly your Uber. Like if you believe squirrels can pass math class. And share this with someone who still thinks retirement homes don't need escape tunnels. Stay brilliant, stay weird, and remember, age is just a number. But jetpacks? Jetpacks are forever.